Magical World War I. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 476, Charlotte, I am proud of you, and Amen is proud of you too. As an 18th order extraordinary person, Charlotte is not afraid of anyone below the saint rank. He destroyed 18 ghost ships in succession and even killed 3 saint rank ghost crew members. Although these crew members no longer have the power they had in their lifetime, they only have some characteristics of the saint rank. Suddenly, he sensed that the power in his body has changed slightly, and there is an additional blood rune of Adonis. When he first came into contact with bloody glory, he put the most effort into the power of Adonis, condensing 5 blood runes: blood flame key, blood flame transfiguration, hand of flame, blazing bomb, and magic flame horse. But later he turned to the power of Asilo, and recently he worked hard on the power of the Van Gogh clan and Arthur, and neglected the secret method of Adonis. The newly condensed blood rune brought Charlotte Mecklen a brand new superpower, the blood flame magic gun. This superpower can condense a supernatural firearm purely with blood energy. The Adonis clan is one of the 6 royal clans of the vampire clan. Their main fighting style is medium range and long range plus control, but their spear fighting skills are actually quite strong, second only to the Arthur clan. The Adonis clan even has 2 special abilities, which are mainly developed to cooperate with spear fighting skills. One is the blazing bullet, and the other is the blood flame magic spear. Charlotte has not undergone authentic Adonis combat training, but under Juno's training, his spear skills are already first class. However, whether it is the blazing bullet or the blood flame magic spear, it is considered a very powerful skill in the middle and high-level battles, but it is not enough to deal with the intensity of the battle at the level of the ghost ship. He felt a little regretful and did not think of activating the blood flame magic spear. He still used the flame knight's spear to destroy the enemies he encountered. A tall figure suddenly appeared, roared vigorously, and then punched down. Charlotte relied on the power of insight to sense the power of this punch. Instead of choosing to bear it hard, he floated away. If he faced the enemy head-on, he could shoot through the enemy with one shot, but he would also be seriously injured. It was not worthwhile to exchange injuries with a ghost crew member. When Charlotte saw the ghost crew member, she was slightly surprised and asked, "Are there still orcs working as sailors?" This was a huge orc. If nothing unexpected happened, he should be an elephant man like Agon. Although he was dead, his body remained intact. His bloodthirsty fighting spirit was thick and solid, and he did not look weak at all. Charlotte took out a red rattlesnake and fired 7 or 8 shots in a row. The blood energy bullets shot at the ghost elephant man, but only produced waves of ripples. There was no way to cause any damage. They were all blocked by the bloodthirsty fighting spirit that protected it. The ghost elephant man roared and rushed up with big strides. If Charlotte had a choice, he would definitely retreat a little further and then use guns to resolve the battle, but from his previous attempt, he knew that his opponent was not an ordinary saint level. He was probably a strong saint level when he was alive, so he could maintain such a strong fighting power after death. He didn't want to choose to fight at all. He jumped off the ghost ship with all his might. Before he could choose another target, his body seemed to be pulled tight by something. With a whoosh, he returned to the Holy Light Kingdom. In this mysterious space, the Holy Light Kingdom was a huge palace. The clear light it released swept the sky and the earth. Every time it approached the Ishmaran Palace, just a little friction would have a momentum like the collapse of the sky and the earth. It was like Mars hitting the earth, and it was like the Nanchaman hitting Mount Zumi. Amabella was excited and shouted, "Charlotte, you are great, the battle just now was great, I am proud of you, and Amen is proud of you too." Dapo Kiloato didn't even know where he got a crown from, and smiled and put it on Charlotte's head. Charlotte didn't dare to put this thing on her head, and hurriedly took it off. He could feel that the crown was twisting and screaming in his hand, but the others didn't seem to see it. Charlotte hastily threw away the flower crown. Dapocherato didn't seem to care and still maintained the temperament of the Queen of the Elves. Amen did make a gesture to Charlotte, but the other 2 did not move. Vasuji, who had a human body and a snake tail, was still lazy. However, the food that the king of the giant whales was eating looked familiar. It was the ghost elephant man that Charlotte Mecklen had just fought fiercely. It seemed to struggle hard, but it was still hastily stuffed into the mouth of this slightly plump woman and swallowed without chewing. Charlotte didn't know whether to change it to a moment of silence for this ghost elephant man. It was obviously fighting back and forth with her, but it was still treated as a snack by the evil god, and it was swallowed in big mouthfuls without savoring it carefully. Charlotte whispered, "Can I go back?" Amabella screamed, How can you leave us, Amen? Your father is leaving us." Amen looked helpless, but still made the same gesture to Charlotte. Charlotte followed the gesture and looked around. It was a strange gap. He did not hesitate and jumped out. The next second, Charlotte reappeared on the Holy Light Kingdom. Everything around him was the same as before, only Juno's face was slightly strange. Charlotte asked, "Teacher, what happened to me just now?" Juno said, "You were just called over by a few evil gods to chat? Don't you have any memory?" Charlotte said embarrassedly, "What am I doing here?" Juno said, "I can't feel any changes in you. Your words and deeds are normal. If I hadn't touched that realm, I probably wouldn't have noticed anything." Charlotte was still frightened and asked, "Then what should I do? What if they take you there again and you can't come back?" Juno shrugged and said, "I suggested that we find a chance to throw away this ship, but you won't choose this suggestion, even if it's the only correct suggestion." Charlotte sighed. He knew that throwing away the Holy Light Kingdom was the best choice, but he was reluctant to do so. After all, it was a legendary battleship. He looked outside. The Holy Light Kingdom was still fighting with a ghost ship in full swing, and his fleet could no longer be seen behind it. Charlotte said, "Shall we continue fighting?" Juno said, "You probably have no way out. I tried to attack just now, but I failed to break the power of the maze. At least, we can't retreat before we gain a certain combat advantage. This maze is a bit strange. I believe the next maze will not be so powerful." Charlotte looked far away at the Ishmaran Palace floating on the sea, and suddenly said, "How about we go and confront that floating palace head-on?" Chapter 477, The Book of Hiding Time and Ages. In the real world, the Holy Light Kingdom is just a huge legendary warship, much smaller than the Ishmaran Palace, which is as huge as an entire palace. It looks like an ant and an elephant. But just now, Charlotte was summoned to that mysterious space by several divine creatures. She saw the Holy Light Kingdom and Ishmaran rubbing against each other. They were evenly matched and almost evenly matched. The power between the two was actually not as exaggerated as the size difference. Juno smiled and said, "Okay." The Holy Light Kingdom suddenly accelerated and directly crashed into any ghost ship. Only then could we see the huge size of this legendary warship. Almost no ghost ship could resist the Holy Light Kingdom. Ghost ships that could not dodge in time would be directly crushed. Occasionally, one or two magic battleship-level ships would be violently knocked away, either flipping over or making unpleasant friction sounds, and directly crushed. Ghost ships at the level of magic battleships were even directly pressed to the bottom of the sea, and only floated out of the sea again until the Holy Light Kingdom passed by. As the Ishmaran Palace got closer and closer, Charlotte felt the enormity of the sea palace more and more. He didn't know what the result would be if he crashed into it directly, but he was willing to accept it no matter what the result was. Under his control, the Holy Light Kingdom was getting faster and faster. The entire legendary warship was shrouded in several layers of mysterious thoughts, and Amabella at the bottom of the ship was shrouded in a layer of clear light. Charlotte was slightly nervous, but Juno was still relaxed, but he was ready, and he took Charlotte away. The Ishmaran Palace did not react at first, but soon he summoned ghost ships, rushed towards the Holy Light Kingdom, and deviated in direction to avoid the Holy Light Kingdom. Charlotte did not give this floating palace any chance at all. After all, the Ishmaran Palace moved slowly, but the Holy Light Kingdom was too fast. He watched the Holy Light Kingdom crush dozens of ghost ships and catch up with the Ishmaran Palace, and then speeded up again. Charlotte's palms were all sweaty. He had expected that even if he won such a shocking collision, the kingdom of the Holy Light God would not be able to be saved. He hadn't thought about what to do with the third maze, even if he passed the Ishmaran Palace. Well, maybe the Agmaris Labyrinth said that it was a challenge to the evil god, but it didn't require a successful challenge? Anyway, after this level is passed, we can talk about other things. The collision that Charlotte expected did not happen. The Ishmaran Palace turned from real to virtual, like a dream bubble. The kingdom of the Holy Light God rushed straight past and did not touch the part of the fallen evil god's body, the transformed maze. Charlotte was slightly stunned. In his eyes, 8 runes with black smoke appeared, just like the collision just now. Although it didn't hit the Ishmaran Palace, it knocked down something else. These maze runes were born, and the maze power that lingered around his body was like having a foundation to rely on, entwined one by one, allowing Charlotte to quickly manipulate these maze runes freely. Among the 8 newly appeared maze runes, one was very familiar to Charlotte, the Mind Channel. After truly mastering the Mind Channel, Charlotte could arbitrarily build a channel between herself and the maze, and between mazes. Just like the maze rune, its power is not infinite. It also needs to be accumulated before it can be released. The third maze rune is also a rune that Charlotte is very familiar with, the Maze Guard. It can not only create maze guards, but also manipulate maze guards, and even grant maze guards various permissions. The fourth maze rune is something Charlotte has never touched before. It is called fog. It can create fog near the maze, making it impossible for people to find the maze, and it can also create fog inside the maze, and even has incredible magical powers such as changing direction and distance. The fifth maze rune is capture. It can capture ruins, cities, buildings, and even ships on the sea, making them part of the maze, thereby expanding the maze. The sixth maze rune is false maze. It is a bit interesting. It can create a maze out of thin air without the help of any ruins, cities, buildings, houses, or manors. Although the false maze cannot exist forever and can only last for a period of time, it is a very practical auxiliary combat ability. Charlotte still started with a false maze, and felt a little interesting about the power of the maze. The seventh maze rune is corrosion. It is a pure attacking force that can make anything, like being washed by time, inevitably corroded, broken, rotten, and even weathered and disappeared. The eighth maze rune is shielding time. It is the opposite of corrosion, and can make a thing, a life, remain in its original appearance forever within the scope of the maze. If a person is lost in a maze and is given shielding time, he can keep his years forever, unless he leaves the maze or loses the shielding time. Then time will suddenly return to its original speed and endure the appearance that should have been presented after a long time. The ninth labyrinth rune is the Book of Years. Charlotte's diary, the transformed Agneris labyrinth, is an incomplete book of years. The real Book of Years can compress the labyrinth world into a book, and can collect a group of creatures into this Book of Years. They will adventure in this book. If the story of this book has an end, the creatures collected in the book will adventure again after completing the story. If the story of this book is long, they will continue to explore the story in the book. If the story of this book comes to an abrupt end, or even only half of it, they will continue to spontaneously deduce the story in the Book of Years. Together with the first labyrinth rune Charlotte got, the labyrinth. There are a total of 9 labyrinth runes. Charlotte closed her eyes, and after a while, she opened them again and asked, "Teacher Juno, why did the Ishmarin Palace disappear? I just gained several labyrinth powers, what's going on?" Juno was also very surprised when he saw the Ishmarin Palace disappear. Hearing Charlotte's consultation, he smiled bitterly and said, "If only the Ishmarin Palace disappeared, I'm afraid I wouldn't be able to answer you. But you also gained several labyrinth powers, so I roughly know what's going on. Do you remember what I said? The blood ancestors of the blood clan, do their responses have a pattern?" Charlotte nodded and said, "I remember you said that." Juno said, "Yes, evil gods have some kind of mysterious rules, which is also what many people rely on when dealing with evil gods. You should have triggered a law of Agneris just now. He didn't want the Ishmarin Palace and the Holy Light God to collide and suffer losses, so he chose to summon the Ishmarin Palace. He violated his own rules and had to abandon the labyrinth power." Chapter 478. He looked happy, as if the snake of fate had patted his shoulder. Charlotte was greatly surprised and said, "It can be like this." Juno shrugged and said, "Who said it wasn't? How do you think I found out that the blood ancestors have become regular?" Charlotte glanced at the ghost ships floating on the sea, which were still in the thousands, and suddenly felt it was ridiculous. "Well, of course this is very evil." He jumped off the Holy Light Kingdom, ran wildly on the waves, and broke into a ghost ship. With a little effort, he knocked all the ghost crew members into the sea, and then performed a maze on the ghost ship. The ghost ship was mazed-like very smoothly. When the maze was completed, the crew members who climbed back onto the ghost ship one after another naturally turned into maze guards. In fact, they were also maze guards, but they were not Charlotte's maze guards. What surprised Charlotte was that he used the power of maze to maze the ghost ship once, but he also gained 5 more powers of maze by mazing the ghost ship and turning the ghost crew into his own maze guards. This was the power of maze left by Agneris, and now it has become Charlotte's wealth. Charlotte ordered the newly received ghost ship to approach the second ghost ship and still did the same thing, first knocking the ghost crew into the sea, then mazing it, and then turning the ghost crew who climbed back on the ship into maze guards. This operation gave him 6 more powers of maze. He tried to establish a mine channel between the 2 ghost ships. He also gained the ability to establish a mine channel 3 times. Juno looked at Charlotte, who was like a monkey, jumping back and forth on the sea, occupying the ghost fleet one by one. He couldn't help but smile and said to himself, he looks so happy, as if the snake of fate patted him on the shoulder. After Charlotte occupied 6 ghost ships, he finally changed his tactics and divided the 6 ghost ships into 2 groups, with 3 ghost ships in each group, to attack a target respectively. He still went to sweep the 7th ghost ship. After changing to the new tactics, his efficiency gradually improved, and soon he expanded the number of ghost ships under his control to hundreds. When Charlotte controlled hundreds of ghost ships, he was finally able to manipulate the fog and lift a blockade of the sea area. Charlotte's fleet reappeared on the sea level. To Charlotte's subordinates, it was the reappearance of the ghost fleet. Kratos was about to give the order to attack these ghost ships when he saw the Holy Light Kingdom slowly sailing out. Juno said on the bow, "Don't attack, Charlotte is receiving his spoils." Juno told the story again, and the saints were greatly surprised. Soon they made their choice and took off to help Charlotte. With the help of this group of saints, Charlotte's speed in controlling the ghost ships increased again, and he even changed his strategy. Originally, Charlotte chose ghost ships that were easier to control, but with the help of his saints, he changed his priority target to the batch of ancient magic warships. If it were with his strength, he would not be able to quickly destroy an ancient magic warship, even if it had become a ghost ship, and he would not be able to deal with the ghost saints on the ancient magic warships. But with loyal subordinates, even if these ancient magic warships did not turn into ghost ships, the saints on the ships still maintained their combat effectiveness before they died. And there was no way to resist. After all, the saints under Charlotte were too powerful. Just as Charlotte turned an ancient magic warship into a maze, he saw a ghost ship in the distance suddenly flip over and sank into the sea. He couldn't help but be very annoyed. He shouted loudly and accelerated his actions, but there were still ghost ships from time to time, either flipped over or sank directly. Even though he tried his best to grab them, the ghost fleet on the sea surface still disappeared one after another. When Charlotte grabbed the last ghost ship, he looked at the 5 ghost ships that sank at the same time on the sea surface and couldn't help but sigh. He only robbed 500 or 600 ghost ships, and most of the ghost ships sank back to the bottom of the sea. The good news is that the 11 ancient magic warships of the ghost fleet were all turned into mazes by him, but there were no legendary warships here. These 11 ancient magic warships were at the level of magic alchemy warships. Because they had sunk before, their actual combat power was inferior to the magic alchemy warships of the same level. A new route appeared, which once again guided Charlotte on the way forward. Charlotte did not hesitate and immediately ordered to continue sailing. He also didn't know what the third maze would look like. However, as long as there is a way, we have to keep going. Isn't it? However, this fleet still had a little episode. Well, Juno did not stay on the Holy Light Kingdom, nor did he go back to the Dhalma base, but went to the Swan Lake. Charlotte could only transfer Kratos to replace herself in the Holy Light Kingdom. After all, the legendary warship is the most powerful weapon in the hands of the saint rank. Charlotte is only in 18th rank and cannot fully exert the power of the Holy Light Kingdom. Charlotte's fleet did not sail for long this time before returning to the Christopher route and ran into Georgiades Hadrian's fleet. Georgiades Hadrian saw hundreds of ghost ships from a distance, and without saying a word, he ordered a U-turn. He looked at Charlotte's ships, which did not seem to be transformed into ghost ships. He really couldn't figure out what happened, so he simply took off and flew over alone. The Black Phoenix's royal earl was quite gentle. Although the two sides had a deep hatred, there was no need to waste words. He shouted, "Charlotte Mecklen, what happened to you? Were you captured by the ghost fleet?" Charlotte was on the Holy Light Kingdom, with Kratos by her side. She was not afraid of Georgiades Hadrian and replied, "On the contrary, we captured a batch of ghost ships." Georgiades Hadrian looked at the Holy Light Kingdom. Charlotte shrugged and said, "The ship has been repaired." Georgiades Hadrian asked a few questions and turned away. He returned to the ship and watched Charlotte's fleet sail for a short time before it suddenly disappeared. He breathed a sigh of relief and commanded the fleet to continue moving forward. He originally doubted Charlotte's origins, but at this moment he was completely sure that this guy must have a great secret. Who can organize such a large-scale ghost fleet? Who can believe that Charlotte has nothing to do with an evil god who controls death? Thinking of what happened on Solomon Island, George Hadrian believed that Charlotte would be devoured by the evil god sooner or later and would definitely not have a good ending. Charlotte disappeared again on Christopher's route and entered a secret route, and the third maze appeared in front of him. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 479 The God of Gold and Wealth. The third labyrinth is also located on an island. Well, it can no longer be called an island. Looking over the sea, the coastline is endless, almost like a continent. If Charlotte hadn't calculated the distance, she would have doubted whether she had reached the new continent, as she had not yet reached the new continent and was still in the Sea of Eggers. Charlotte was on the Holy Light Kingdom, looking at this land. The coastal side of it was all shallow sandy beaches, which was obviously not suitable for large ships to dock. The fleet had to anchor far away. After the long sandy beach, there was a very tall cliff, on which a temple was built. The previous two labyrinths were palace-style, but this labyrinth was a temple, which made Charlotte feel a little strange. She thought to herself, is this the domain of some evil god captured by Agneris again? This time, Charlotte took Ogon and Cretus, took a small boat, and landed on land. As soon as he stepped on the land, a thought came out of the diary in his arms. Charlotte Mecklen is about to challenge the third labyrinth, the Golden Temple. It was originally dedicated to Lanudi-Udiu, the god of gold and wealth. After Lanudi-Udiu was torn apart by the three evil gods, his temple became a no-man's land. Charlotte brought Cretus and Ogon to the top of the cliff and saw a very lively small city. It was built around the Golden Temple. With this temple as the center, a prosperous market was built. You can even see behind the temple, there is a building similar to a government office. People come and go in the small city, full of the breath of life. Although she didn't get any hints, Charlotte could see that the residents of this small city are ordinary humans. They are just like any city in Fars, but with different customs and habits. As soon as Charlotte and his friends appeared, more than 10 teenagers ran over and shouted, "Strangers! Where are you from? Do you need our help?" Charlotte couldn't help asking, "Do you often have strangers here?" A very handsome boy with delicate features like a girl said with a smile, "Of course not often. Our Golden Island deviates from the Christopher route and is farther from the Ferdinand route. Generally speaking, ships from the old and new continents will not pass by us. But there are always exceptions. Occasionally, there will be lost ships that replenish water here, and we have some commercial exchanges with several inhabited islands on the Christopher route." Charlotte was slightly surprised. He knew the Golden Island. In fact, the Golden Island was also an inhabited island on the Christopher route. It was just far away from the route. Generally speaking, no ships would pass by, but it was not an unknown island. Charlotte had done his homework and checked the navigation information. He knew that most of the residents on the Golden Island were people of the Sherlock dynasty. Because the country was destroyed, many people of the Sherlock dynasty went to the New World and tried to rebuild their own country. Some of them stopped on the way and settled on some islands. The residents of the Golden Island were in this situation. They carried a lot of books and communicated with the outside world. They were not isolated, so these teenagers were not very curious when they saw Charlotte. They just wanted to make some extra money. Charlotte smiled and said, "How much does it cost to hire you as a guide?" The boy with handsome features and beautiful like a girl said, "You can exchange our money at the temple. It only takes 1 centime to hire us." Charlotte was very curious and said, "Okay, take us into the city first." Entering the city, Charlotte's diary conveyed a thought, "Rebuild the faith of the true God on the Pale City, and you can complete the challenge of the third maze." The Pale City originally believed in the god of gold and wealth. After the fall of Ranudi-Udiu, Agneris stole the power of the Golden Temple. Charlotte Mecklen, you need to drive away the followers and priests of Agneris, change the faith of the Pale City, and replace it with any righteous god. Charlotte thought to herself, that must be to establish the faith of the Serpent of Fate. However, this time they are all ordinary people. It is not easy to hurt them. I can only use gentle methods. I am not very good at it. Charlotte now has 3 legendary warships, 7 magic alchemy warships, 11 ancient magic ghost warships, and 5 or 600 ghost ships. It is not difficult to capture this small city, but changing faith is a technical job. In fact, the mainstream trend on Earth is to hope that the backward people will always be backward and maintain their own characteristics. And it is generally believed that conquest cannot make people surrender. Of course, if you look through the history books, you will know that even Rome was conquered, and even Persia can change its faith. The 3 of them, led by a group of teenagers, arrived at the Golden Temple, where they can indeed exchange local currency. Well, the ancient currency of the Sherlock dynasty. In fact, after the rise of Fars, it replaced the Sherlockian dynasty and inherited many of the Sherlockian dynasty's culture and systems, such as the currency unit. The Sherlockian dynasty also used Iku, fallen sentiment. For example, the language, Farsi and ancient Sherlock are in the same language family, with more than 90% of the same vocabulary, very similar pronunciation, and even similar grammatical rules. The reason why Charlotte is proficient in Sherlock is not that he likes ancient Sherlock culture, but that Farsi people naturally understand Sherlock, and they can specialize in it as long as they work a little harder. Of course, although the currency unit has been inherited, Fars will definitely recoin and will not use Sherlock gold coins. Charlotte used 2 gold Iku to exchange for a bag full of ancient Sherlock sentiment copper coins. He casually gave half to Kretis and Ogon, but he only took a dozen sentiments and distributed them to a dozen teenagers. These dozen teenagers were very happy. They originally thought that they would only be given 1 sentiment in total. After all, leading the way as a guide is not a technical job, and they would be together anyway. Even if Charlotte and the others only hired 1 person, they would not disperse. Charlotte asked the name of the leading boy and learned that his name was Tengding. This name has a slightly derogatory meaning, which means spoon. Parents gave their children this name, which means that there is 1 more person to eat at home, which is a bit bitter about life. Charlotte listened to the situation of the Pale City intentionally or unintentionally, and then said, "We are not only travelers, but also missionaries. If you are willing to believe in the Serpent of Fate and become his believers, you can get a centum of faith money every month. If you can attract other children to believe in the Serpent of Fate, I can pay 1 more centimos for each new person you attract. Are you willing to believe in the Serpent of Fate?" Tangding was overjoyed and shouted, "Can the people I attract also get a centum of faith money every month?" Chapter 480 I can help you get a document allowing you to preach openly here. Charlotte smiled and said, "Of course, the Pale City probably has a population of tens of thousands, but there are not many minors under the age of 15, maybe only a few thousand. Although according to the normal population model, this structure is definitely wrong, but Charlotte is not doing a census, he just wants to rebuild the belief of the Serpent of Fate here. As for a few thousand centimes, that's not much money. 100 centimes is only 1 4, and 1,000 centimes is only 1 Iku. If Charlotte can get a few thousand believers, she will have an excellent start, and then it won't be so difficult." Tangding pinched his lips and blew a loud whistle, and more than a dozen children all dispersed. After a while, everyone brought 3 or 5 children over. Tangding looked at Charlotte with some pride and said, "Sir, you should pay the first faith gold." Charlotte laughed and really paid each of these children a centime, and then paid the teenagers who brought their friends over according to the number of people. Tangding's eyes lit up. He gathered the group of children together, chattered for a while, and then asked everyone to disperse. This time, more children came soon. Charlotte not only really gave these children sense, but also taught them the Beast Scout transformation technique and bloodthirsty fighting spirit. As for whether someone could practice it, it was a lottery. After all, in Fars, those who received formal university education and were able to enter the extraordinary world were also picked out of 1,000. Because Charlotte had too many soldiers, the Knights of Favonius had at least hundreds of thousands of people, but there were only a dozen people who really became extraordinary by practicing the Beast Scout transformation technique. Most people who practiced this secret technique successfully were extraordinary themselves. This group of children did not expect that Charlotte would not only give money, but also teach extraordinary secrets. Some children were greedy for money, but some children had an incomparable desire to step into the extraordinary, so a group of children quickly gathered in front of Charlotte. Some people kept running out to find more friends, and some people sat on the ground to listen to Charlotte explain the extraordinary knowledge that was hard to come by. There were empty spaces near the Golden Temple, and hundreds of children gathered there, which did not seem out of place. Moreover, this city was far away from the world, and the residents were all familiar with each other, relatively simple, and almost crime-free. The soldiers patrolling the city did not care about anything at all. Although there were many children gathered here, every passerby just came to take a look out of curiosity. Except for a very small number of people who heard about the faith money and came to receive a life sentence, most of them left quickly. After all, adults attach great importance to faith and will not change their faith casually. Even if it is just for a life sentence, they will never cheat outsiders. As it was getting dark, Charlotte said loudly, "I will come here again tomorrow. If you still want to believe in the Serpent of Fate, you can continue to come here to receive the faith money." He announced the time to come the next day, and took the two saints to find more places to stay in the city. There were very few travelers from outside the Pale City. So there were no institutions such as inns, but Charlotte also had a way. He randomly found a few large families that looked clean, and offered to pay money and ask for accommodation for a few days. After trying the fifth house, the owner of the house hesitated for a while and agreed. After Charlotte, Kratos and Agon settled down, Agon couldn't help asking, "Do you really believe that those children will believe in the Snake of Fate? They are obviously doing it for money. Tomorrow, many people will pretend to be believers and come here to cheat you out of money, treating you as a fool." Charlotte smiled and said, "It's better than fighting a war. If I can use this method to gain a group of believers of the righteous gods, I don't want to use rough means. After all, we have fought too many wars recently. If we can solve the problem peacefully, even if it is a little wasteful, it is much more cost-effective than fighting a war. A shell from the magic alchemy battleship is enough to make tens of thousands of residents in the Pale City believe in the Snake of Fate once. Just a few thousand teams, what can it matter if they are cheated?" Agon curled his lips. He knew that Charlotte disliked war and death extremely. This was one of the reasons why he was willing to join Charlotte. Charlotte did work hard to integrate the orcs into the human race. Although Agon felt that Charlotte's doing so was too inefficient, he still felt that Charlotte's doing so was quite to his liking. After all, handing the orcs over to a leader who valued the lives of orcs was much better than handing them over to a war maniac. Charlotte said to Kratos, "Tomorrow, please ask Sir Kratos to buy a piece of land. We are going to build a temple of the Serpent of Fate. If there's any extra land for sale, you can buy it all. We will definitely need a second, third, or even more temples of the Serpent of Fate." Kratos smiled slightly and said, "I have no problem." He also explained to them that this time he came to the Ager's Sea to challenge the Labyrinth evil god. After he knew the details of the challenge, he would also explain it to all his men. Kratos knew that Charlotte needed to replace the worship of Agneris with a true god faith, and he would do his best to support Charlotte no matter what method she used. The three of them rested for a night, and the next morning, Charlotte asked Kratos to buy land and asked Agon to return to the fleet and bring a group of people. It was noon, and while Charlotte was preaching, Kratos brought a fat, wealthy middle-aged man to Charlotte and said, "He has 5 plots of land in the Pale City, 3 of which have houses on them, and he is willing to sell them to us. But he doesn't want money, he wants a ship to go to the New World to look for opportunities." Charlotte looked at the wealthy middle-aged man who looked like a business elite, and didn't mention that the evil gods in the New World were fighting. She smiled and said, "I do have a lot of merchant ships, but the price of merchant ships is much more expensive than land. You know, these are all ships that can sail the sea, which are different from the fishing boats in the Pale City. The best sea ship must be able to carry more people, and it must be designed to withstand wind and waves. It also needs a group of experienced sailors and more cargo." The fat businessman smiled slightly and said, "I can help you get a document from the city government to allow you to preach openly here. You must know that there are gods here, and it is impossible to allow other missionaries unless you obtain permission to preach." Charlotte thought about it and said with a smile, "Okay. You've convinced me. Let's make a deal." The two sides quickly reached an agreement and signed a contract. Charlotte asked Agon to get a well-preserved ghost ship close to the coast, and asked Kratos to take Tangding to inspect the 10 plots of land. Ghost ships can definitely cross the sea. They just had bad luck and sank to the bottom of the sea, not because of poor design or insufficient technology. These ghost ships are almost all ocean-going ships. Most of them are stronger and larger than the merchant ships captured by Charlotte in Cappadocia, and can carry more cargo and sailors. Chapter 481 The First Temple of the Fate Serpent in the Pale City. Charlotte was also very considerate and sent a group of ghost crew members. As for what would happen if they took the ghost ship to the New World? Sorry, even Charlotte herself couldn't know. Anyway, he was very honest and told the ghost crew members to be good and try not to reveal their evil deeds. Well, some ghost ships that had been in the sea for a short time looked quite new, and the crew members were less rotten. At first glance, they looked no different from ordinary living people, but they couldn't sail under the sun. Charlotte had tried it all along the way. When sailing during the day, these ghost ships would flip into the seabed. Although they could still sail during the day, they would rot faster. The fat businessman was also very honest. As expected, he introduced Charlotte to a clerk from the Pale City and got him the missionary license documents. There was no problem with the 10 pieces of land delivered. He put all his wealth on this transaction and didn't plan to leave any way out in the Pale City. Both parties were straightforward people. 3 days later, the businessman took all his property and set sail. It was only after he went out to sea and checked the cabin that he was surprised to find that the ship actually had a batch of goods. This batch of goods was well sealed and most of them were still in normal condition. The value was almost as good as his wealth. Not to mention how happy this brave businessman was, Charlotte also quickly recruited a group of people and began to build the first temple of the Snake of Destiny. Some of these people were locals, and some were Charlotte's own people. The locals were mainly responsible for fishing, and his own men were mainly responsible for building the temple. These people who were called to work were all maze guards, and almost all of them were extraordinary. They were all powerful and fierce when working. The huge stones needed to build the temple could often be carried by one person, which was much more convenient than a crane. It took only 7 or 8 days for the Temple of the Snake of Destiny to be roughly built. Charlotte even tried to pray silently once, hoping that the Snake of Destiny would open the temple. Well, the Snake of Destiny was very face-saving and really brought down the divine glory. The temple, which was originally built with huge stones, had countless decorative murals, patterns, sculptures, and fancy columns under the divine light. There was even a sculpture in the middle of the temple, the statue of the Serpent of Fate. Charlotte was overjoyed. There were countless believers of the Serpent of Fate in his fleet. He found a volunteer to be a priest and then began to recruit clergy. Although many young people in the Pale City expressed their belief in the Serpent of Fate under the attack of Shangding, this belief was too weak to even have a divine covenant. Charlotte could only pinch his nose and gather the number of people first, and then slowly consider the issue of piety. On the 3rd day after the temple was built, almost all the residents of the Pale City had a big dream. They dreamed of a god wearing golden armor, angrily calling on everyone to overthrow the temple of the Serpent of Fate and announcing that he would bring disaster to the city. In the morning, countless residents swarmed into the streets and rushed to the temple of the Serpent of Fate. Of course, Charlotte didn't have such a dream. But many of the clergy he recruited had unsteady faith and also had this dream. When he woke up in the morning, he realized that the atmosphere was not right. He randomly arrested a few people and asked them, and then he knew that this kind of thing had happened. Charlotte could only lead a group of maze guards, walked out of the temple, and arranged a battle formation. Looking at the residents who were shouting and clamoring to tear down the temple of the Serpent of Fate, Charlotte sighed. Of course, he couldn't allow such a thing. After all, the Serpent of Fate had already favored him. He said to himself, I wanted to solve it peacefully, but I didn't expect that we still had to fight. A dozen residents who rushed to the front shouted, they are evil gods. They spread faith in order to harvest our souls. We can't allow the evil gods to spread faith here, tear down the temple, and bury these outsiders alive. Charlotte knew that in the face of such fanatical believers, there was no point in talking, and no matter what he said, it would be useless. He raised his hands and was about to order an attack when he heard a voice ringing in his ears. What's wrong, Charlotte? If you are in trouble, why don't you come to the teacher? Charlotte turned around and saw Juno Arthur. She was overjoyed and shouted, Teacher, why are you here? But in the face of such fanatical evil god believers, what can you do? Juno smiled slightly and said, Evil gods are evil gods after all. They can only act according to the rules, so naturally there are many flaws. Juno blinked and said, You should have remembered that your teacher also knows a little bit about dream magic. The peak saint of the old world stretched out a finger and said calmly, May all life fall into deep sleep, and may all souls swim freely in dreams. I will dominate your dreams, and your cognition will change because of my son. Juno Arthur showed what it means to be the strongest of the Blood Clan. Under his Blood Clan's great dream magic, Thousands of residents of the Pale City no longer had the aggressive momentum just now, and they were in a state of stiffness, with dull eyes, and all fell into dream. Charlotte was also pulled into the dreamland by Juno. He saw with his own eyes that the teacher was glowing with golden light and was wearing a layer of golden armor. He was shouting, "Someone stole my power yesterday and passed on the wrong oracle. The one who will bring disaster to this city is Priest Giannis. He betrayed me." Charlotte couldn't help but say, "The teacher's ability to confuse right and wrong is quite strong." Juno bewitched everyone's hearts, then came down and said, "Have you learned it?" Charlotte nodded and said, "Dream magic can only be used to guide the force according to the situation and cannot be changed forcibly. That's why you didn't let them overthrow the Golden Temple, because that's impossible. Instead, it would wake them up. But if the target is changed to a certain priest, there will be no problem at all." Juno smiled and said, "You are really my best student. Now you know how the Blood Clan's mantra is used in battle, right?" Charlotte was so impressed by Juno that he prostrated himself. He had never thought that Arthur's Blood Clan's mantra would be so powerful. Whether it was the last Blood Clan prophecy or this Blood Clan illusion, both were powerful group attacks. In terms of the battlefield, Arthur was the undisputed number one in the Old Continent. Not to mention the Blood Clan, even the human race and the orcs did not have such a grand attack secret technique. The two of them left the illusionary dreamland and saw the residents of the Pale City wake up, then turned around angrily and rushed to the Golden Temple. Not long after, an old man shouted in panic, "Don't believe in the evil god's bewitching. I am the spokesperson of Agmaris. I will never betray the god of the labyrinth." Charlotte used the light agility technique and quietly mixed into the crowd. Soon, she saw an old priest tied to a wooden stake, with firewood set up around him. A young and handsome man, holding a torch, had a gentle smile on his face. When Charlotte saw the man holding the torch, his body felt like falling into an ice cave. He was familiar with his face and couldn't help but exclaim, "Captain Huntington." Chapter 482. Buy a novel and get a free Zimmerman peripheral. Then Charlotte remembered another name of Captain Huntington, Zimmerman Axel Robin. A troublemaker who is unparalleled in the world and invincible. Charlotte regretted coming to watch the fun. Even if Juno Arthur was by her side, she might not be able to resist Zimmerman and protect him. Moreover, Juno was still in the Temple of the Serpent of Fate at this time, quite a distance away from him. Zimmerman looked back and saw that it was Charlotte. He smiled as if he saw an old acquaintance and lit the firewood. The flames burned fiercely. Janus, the priest of the evil god Agmaris, screamed loudly, cried bitterly, and begged for mercy. In the end, he even said that he was instigated by the city lord. But no one sympathized with him or pitied him. Instead, some people believed his words and called for the arrest of the city lord. Soon the priest was burned to death. A large number of residents, under the instigation of someone, attacked the city lord's mansion again. Charlotte had been staring at the Captain Huntington. He had known from the documents that he was missing, but because he was busy rebelling against his father-in-law in Brittany at the time, he suppressed the matter under the suggestion of the Serpent of Fate. Charlotte always thought that she might not see Zimmerman again. After all, Zimmerman's memory had been destroyed by the Emerald Book. Even if Captain Huntington was missing, he might not be able to escape from Kilmainham prison. Even if he escaped, he might not remember who he was. But, fate is so wonderful. After Zimmerman lit the fire, he watched quietly for a while. He did not follow others to attack the city lord's mansion. Instead, he greeted Charlotte and walked into the Golden Temple. When Zimmerman's figure disappeared in the Golden Temple, Charlotte used his agility to the highest level and ran all the way back to the Temple of the Serpent of Fate. When he saw Juno, he felt happier than seeing his father-in-law. He whispered, "Teacher, I saw Zimmerman." Juno was slightly stunned and asked, "Zimmerman Axel Robin? Didn't he die a long time ago?" It was Antonio and the 5 top saints of the Axel family who besieged and killed him. The whole continent knows about this. Charlotte didn't dare to hide it. After all, at this time, there was no point in hiding this secret. He told the whole thing from beginning to end. Juno was very surprised and shook his head repeatedly, saying, "Julius Axel lost the throne of the emperor. It's not unfair. How could he do such a stupid thing? Wood Brandon can actually ascend to the position of Prime Minister of the Fars Empire. How can a fool like him ascend to such a high position? What on earth did this pair of fools think back then? How could they do such a stupid and incredible thing?" Charlotte also felt that the old emperor and the Prime Minister of the Empire were indeed a bit incredible. Any adventure should have risk assessment and benefit assessment. If you want to kill Zimmerman, you should calculate it anyway. At least you can't put all the power of the Axel royal family into it. Once it fails, who can bear the consequences? Well, unless Wood Brandon has an affair with his old father-in-law, there is no explanation. But from the perspective of the ascension of the Emperor of Brittany and the absence of Wood Brandon, it doesn't seem to be related. Charlotte doesn't care much about how stupid the old emperor and the prime minister of the previous dynasty are now. He is more concerned about what he should do when Zimmerman appears. When Charlotte asked her teacher Juno for help, Juno Arthur pondered for a long time and said lightly, "Although Zimmerman is invincible and your teacher may not be afraid of him, I will never attack him unless I have no choice. You have nothing to do with this matter. You are not from the Axel family, and you have nothing to do with Wood Brandon. He may not embarrass you," Charlotte thought to herself, "but I am the son-in-law of the Brittany family." Juno suddenly smiled and said, "However, if he hears the rumors about you and Miss Mecklenburg, there is nothing we can do." Charlotte was shocked and said, "There is nothing between me and senior sister Mecklenburg. I have my own lover, and the whole continent knows about this." Juno smiled and said, "Yes, the whole continent knows that you have countless romantic stories all over the continent, and you have also won the hearts of these ladies. Oh, not only ladies, but also a princess." Well, the list is quite long, but they were stopped at the door by Miss Anne. "Well, now Miss Anne of Brittany is also a princess and a duchess." Charlotte looked bitter and said, "Teacher, please stop joking. I am really loyal to Anne." Juno looked like he didn't believe it. He could give a legendary battleship to Guillaume, and he also gave Mecklenburg a fleet, loaned him 2 cities, including several magic alchemy battleships, and an island called St. Michael. This island was very famous and had been occupied by pirates for many years. Even the Ingrimer Royal Navy couldn't do anything about it, but it was conquered by his student, and he gave it to the Imperial Rose generously. You want to say that Charlotte has nothing to do with Princess May, the first rose of the Empire? At least he, the teacher, absolutely doesn't believe it. Well, there is also a Miss Strasbourg Rose. Now her fleet is called the East Wind Fleet, which is openly competing with the Knights of Westwind. Now there are 3 major fleets of the Far's Imperial Navy, Charlotte Mecklen's fleet, Mecklenburg's Imperial Rose fleet, and the third is Sophia Galanov's East Wind fleet. Juno was overjoyed when he thought of these things. This student is really fun. As a baron, he sometimes likes to make fun of the Far's people. Charlotte didn't expect that the teacher had the potential to be a funny person. He said with a frown, "Zimmerman won't really misunderstand me and Senior Mecklenburg and make trouble for me for this, right?" Juno patted Charlotte on the shoulder and said, "You can think positively. After all, Zimmerman was unparalleled in his romantic life and his reputation was even worse than yours. He may not like Miss Sue May." Charlotte thought to herself, "I know what a man is. Even if Zimmerman doesn't like Senior Mecklenburg, he will definitely not allow me to reach out. The problem is, I haven't reached out yet. Damn it, if Zimmerman really attacks me, when I go back to Fars, I will promote a peripheral product for the novel. Buy a novel and get a green hat. I will name this hat Zimmerman Hat." Chapter 483. If you push me too far, I will really attack Senior Sister Mecklenburg. If you push me too far, I'll really attack Senior Mecklenburg. Well, forget it. I can't let Annie down. Charlotte was worrying when he saw a miracle. A golden pillar of light shot up into the sky above the golden temple and lingered for a long time. He suddenly came to his senses and put his hand on the ground. Sure enough, this pale city could be turned into a maze. When Charlotte chose to turn the pale city into a maze, his maze power increased by more than 200 times, which was roughly equivalent to dozens of ghost ships. Charlotte said to Juno, "Teacher, those people really killed the city lord, and I don't know what Zimmerman did, but this city no longer belongs to Agmaris." Juno sighed lightly and said, "Zimmerman suddenly became crazy back then. I always suspected that he had seized the power of some evil god. Now it seems that he has indeed embarked on a certain evil god's path, but I don't know how he plans to cross the mysterious and obscure line between the saint rank and the god rank. I really want to communicate with him about the god rank." Charlotte whispered, "Teacher, you will definitely be able to ascend to the god safely." Juno shook his head and said, "I hope so." The strongest man in Baron suddenly said, "The main reason I came with you is that I want to get in touch with more divine creatures and find out the direction they went wrong so that I can avoid those wrong paths. Thanks to you, I have discovered a lot from the 5 divine creatures on the Holy Kingdom of Light. I thought there was no problem before, but it turned out to be a wrong choice on them. Some time ago, I also met the fallen evil god Ishmael. In the past few days, I have also explored the Golden Temple and have some understanding of the god who was in charge of gold and wealth back then. This road is difficult and dangerous, and the future is long. Sooner or later, you will also embark on this road. I will pass on all these experiences to you, but you should not believe them all. My exploration may still be wrong. Juno looked out for a long time and said, no matter what Zimmerman planned to do, he has left now. Now you should work hard to spread the belief in the Serpent of Destiny. There is no suspense about passing this level of the maze. I have to go back to the Swan Lake first. Charlotte sent Juno away, summoned for help, and brought a group of maze guards to break into the Golden Temple. The temple was intact, but all the lives inside disappeared, and the bodies of the priests and believers of the evil god Agmaris were everywhere. Although she knew that Zimmerman was cruel and merciful, she couldn't help but sigh when she saw this scene, and asked people to move the bodies of these people out and send them to the Holy Light God Kingdom. These are the evil god believers, and there are still remnants of Agmaris power on their bodies. If they are not handled properly, it will be very troublesome, so they can't be buried underground, which will pollute the earth, nor can they be thrown into the sea, which will pollute the sea. They can only be sent to the Holy Light God Kingdom and let them treat them as snacks. Well, using evil gods to deal with evil gods is fine. After cleaning up the Golden Temple, Charlotte prayed to the Serpent of Fate again, and the Serpent of Fate responded happily. As the divine light fell, the temple was already filled with the breath of the Fate snake from inside to outside. The patterns, sculptures, murals, architectural style, and even the main statue of the god on the temple all looked like the Fate snake. Charlotte took the time to write an original short story, which was about 17,000 words, describing how the evil god of the labyrinth put down his butcher knife and immediately became the slave of the Fate snake under the guidance of the Fate snake. Well, the main story outline comes from the Buddha's teachings on robbers. In the story, he described the Fate snake as powerful, kind, compassionate, enthusiastic, and wise. Anyway, he wrote it in any way he could. It didn't matter if the story was a little bad. Anyway, after it spread in the future, novelists would naturally add details and exquisite words to this story, just like Mao Zedong modified the Romance of the Three Kingdoms. He asked hundreds of teenagers to tell this story in the streets and alleys. The residents of the Pale City burned the priests and dragged the city lord out to kill him. Just when they were confused, a child suddenly spread the praises of the Serpent of Fate, and they unknowingly believed in the true God. Charlotte originally thought that it would take a long time, but she didn't expect that in just 7 or 8 days, the entire Pale City would no longer have any other beliefs, and the influence of Agmaris would be completely eliminated, and it would completely become a city of the Serpent of Fate. Charlotte also asked people to build more than 10 small temples of the Serpent of Fate, and set up the logo of the Serpent of Fate in various places in the city, and gave tableware with the image of the Serpent of Fate to every household. On this huge island, pillars with the image of the Serpent of Fate were set up everywhere. Soon he knew that he had successfully challenged the third maze. A new route appeared again. Charlotte commanded her fleet and set out on the journey again. At this moment, there was an uninvited guest on Georgiette Hadrian's ship. If Charlotte could see it, she would definitely shout, "Captain Huntington." Well, Charlotte would never call out Zimmerman's name. What if Zimmerman didn't recover his memory and he called out memory killing? Zimmerman skillfully performed the Beast God transformation technique. He didn't change into an orc, but into a Black Phoenix noble. The family of the Black Phoenix noble couldn't tell, so he easily occupied the 3 ships of the Black Phoenix noble and seized all his wealth, including his family. After Zimmerman appeared on the ship, Georgiette Hadrian found that he had lost his way and left the Christopher route. However, a few days later, Georgiette Hadrian's fleet magically returned to the Christopher route, which made the Black Phoenix Earl very confused and puzzled. This time, Charlotte soon encountered the 4th maze. This maze was on a deserted island. There was no living person on the island. The city was also extremely dilapidated and it was unknown how many years it had been abandoned. Charlotte was very confused. Although the diary had a hint for him to challenge the 4th maze, the desolate city. But there was no hint on how to complete the challenge. He stepped into the city and tried to make a maze several times, but he couldn't make the desolate city a maze. Obviously, he needed to occupy it first. But how to occupy a city with no people at all? Shouldn't it be automatically occupied once you set foot on the land of the city? Charlotte was puzzled. He tried to pray to the Snake of Fate, but there was no response. Charlotte brought a group of people and temporarily lived in the desolate city, trying to find out the secrets of this city. Chapter 484, the fourth branch of the evil Gadarena. You who travel the long river of time, know all mysteries, master extraordinary rituals, and rule the court of fate. Do you hear my voice? I want to know how to turn the deserted city into a maze. Perhaps because you prayed too many times, Charlotte suddenly felt that his head was hit by a silver snake's tail. The hit was neither light nor heavy, just enough to make the back of his head burn, but not enough to make him faint. Charlotte Mecklen received a hit of fate. Although the little snake was not necessarily angry, it was at least unhappy. Charlotte was hit by the snake's tail and dared not pray anymore, but his mind suddenly opened up and he thought to himself, does the snake of fate think I'm too stupid and remind me that this problem is actually easy to solve? He thought for a while, slapped his thigh, and said, let's demolish the city first. Charlotte mobilized a group of strong maze guards, and took out the blood spirit, freed the posture of the flame knight's spear, and turned into a whirlwind of fire with a gun, knocking down 8 walls in one breath, and began to forcibly demolish the ruined city. The city was already full of holes. How could it withstand such a brutal demolition? In just half a day, there was no wall left standing on the ground. Before Charlotte had time to wipe the sweat off his face, his subordinates reported, we found an entrance to the cave, but no one can get in. Even Mr. Vigo tried, but failed. Charlotte thought to himself, that's right, the snake of fate gave me this hint. He strode to the entrance of the cave, and the diary really conveyed a thought. Charlotte Mecklen is about to challenge the fourth maze, the desolate city. This city has been completely abandoned. The real desolate city is underground. Please find the entrance and go in alone to clear out the monsters wandering in the underground city. Well, it is also the fourth branch venue of the evil Gadarena. If you encounter the challenge of the evil god candidate, please make sure you don't die. You are not on the same track as them. Charlotte finally understood why he couldn't turn the desolate city into a maze. It turned out that the real desolate city was underground. He had never stepped into the real desolate city, so of course he couldn't turn it into a maze. However, this underground city can only be entered alone, which made Charlotte very confused. He called 2 saint-level subordinates one after another, and they really couldn't enter it, and they couldn't destroy the entrance. Until Juno came over to take a look, the strongest of the Blood Clan said with a smile, this is a special space created by more than 10 evil gods. You don't have to think about violent destruction. Only you can really go in alone. Charlotte hesitated for a long time. If he didn't go in to challenge this underground maze, he would be sent to the evil Gadarena. Well, it seems that going in is a better choice. Charlotte prepared a batch of combat supplies, a large amount of food and water, and even prepared more than a dozen sets of clothes and shoes and socks, and then jumped into the underground city. After jumping into the entrance of the underground city, Charlotte felt that the whole world seemed to be two-dimensional. The colorful eyes were colorful, but there was no real thing. His body seemed to no longer exist and turned into another dimension. Not only matter, but even time became blurred. This feeling was very strange. Charlotte couldn't tell how long it had been. He could only calculate it based on the speed of his thoughts. It seemed like several months had passed, because he could recite more than 20 online articles. But he didn't think it had been that long. After all, human thinking is limited by the body. It's not that thinking can only be so fast, but that the human body can only support such a fast thinking. The nerve transmission is only more than 100 meters per second. The above are just ordinary humans. The nerve transmission speed of extraordinary people is much faster than that of ordinary humans. After all, low-level extraordinary people can cut bullets with knives. His feet sank slightly, and Charlotte knew that he was stepping on hard ground. After a long time, he regained all his senses. Charlotte was very surprised because he had returned to the appearance of 15 or 16 years old. He was wearing a very worn hunting suit with rough craftsmanship. Many places were made of mixed leather. Apart from being close to the body, there was no other advantage. He appeared in a hall with about 30 or 40 people, divided into 4 or 5 small teams. He was in one of the small teams. There were 5 people in total, 3 men and 2 women, and they were about the same age as him. Charlotte sensed it and found that Bloody Glory was still functioning normally. He was still an 18th level extraordinary person, and there was no problem with his various supernatural powers. However, he found that all the extraordinary weapons he had prepared could not be used. Only ordinary weapons and various supplies could be taken out from the mirror world. Well, his mirror world was also cut off, leaving only a very small piece. Charlotte had always intended to expand the mirror world, and after seizing most of the portholes of the Queen Bee and obtaining his own fleet, his mirror world became extremely vast, but now he could not pass through the infinite mirror world and leave this evil Gatarina. Well, the power of the maze would not work either. Now, in addition to his own extraordinary power, Charlotte only had a batch of ordinary weapons, supplies and water, and he was also cut off from the possibility of leaving this world on his own. Charlotte stabilized his mentality. Even without any extraordinary weapons, he was still an 18th level extraordinary person, but the light agility that he usually relied on most had dropped from X12 to the normal level of X5, which made him a little uncomfortable. After he entered the evil Gatarina, he kept checking his status. He came back to his senses after being called by his companions several times. A girl whispered, "We must unite. This time it is a team battle. Only the winning team can get a divine fragment. The losing team will get nothing." Charlotte glanced at the 4 teammates and remained silent. He was not on the same side as these people. He came to challenge the 4th maze, and these people were participating in the evil Gatarina. Yes, the 4th branch venue. Although Charlotte didn't know what a divine fragment was, a team could only get one, and he definitely couldn't get it. Unless he killed all his teammates. But he was really not that easy to kill. The 2 boys kept trying to please the girl, saying together, "Yuna, we all listen to you. You are the best in the academy, and you will definitely lead us to victory." Yuna glanced at Charlotte and said, "I know almost everyone in the academy, how come I haven't seen you before?" Charlotte shrugged and said, "Maybe I am too unknown. My name is Jinan, and I am willing to cooperate with everyone." Yuna was still a little skeptical. She said, "Those who can participate in the evil Gatarina are all extraordinary people. What level of extraordinary are you?" Charlotte scratched his head. He really didn't know how to answer. He just felt that he should not be 18th level. He was determined not to believe that these young companions could step into the extraordinary sequence above the middle level. Chapter 485 Golden Kite Academy. A young man looked down on Charlotte and whispered, "Yuna. We have no impression of him. He just broke through recently at most. He can only be the 1st level." Charlotte nodded hurriedly and said, "Yes, I am the 1st level." Yuna nodded and said, "What kind of extraordinary route did she take?" "This little girl has a delicate face and a slightly thin figure, but her legs are very long and her waist is slender. She is a bit like a goddess and has a little leadership style. She is indeed at a level that can charm boys of the same age. However, Charlotte is not young in both of his lives. To be a math teacher, you need a graduate degree or above. He has also graduated from university in Fars for 2 years and is already a serious imperial civil servant. He is not very interested in this kind of little girl. Moreover, if we really talk about beauty, Anne is the West Wind goddess of Gorgia University after all, which is much better than this little girl named Yuna. Well, Anne's only shortcoming is that her extraordinary level is not high. She just broke through the 2nd level of the Dream Walker and didn't even dare to mention it to Charlotte. However, as the Princess of the Fars Empire, the Grand Duchess of the Principality of Moldova, and the legendary novelist Anne Mecklen, the extraordinary level is really not important. Charlotte hesitated for a moment and whispered, "It's just the most ordinary one. There are too many extraordinary paths for humans," and he didn't know what the academy mentioned by these young people actually taught. It's not easy to give a direct answer. Yuna looked a little helpless and said, "Another guy who practices bloodthirsty fighting spirit." Charlotte was shocked and thought, "These young people don't look like orcs. How come that academy teaches bloodthirsty fighting spirit?" The boy who spoke just now was a little excited and said, "What orc transformation did you choose?" "It's best to be a meat shield type. We are just missing a main defense." Charlotte thought to herself, "I'll give you defense." "Beautiful," he whispered. "I chose Channing Hayato." The boy was immediately disappointed and said, "A guy who is good at running away is really useless. Most of the participants in the evil Gatarina are young people, but there are also 2 teams that are adults, but their strength does not seem to be much better." Charlotte roughly knew from the conversations of these people that they all came from the New World. The Old World had 9 righteous gods sitting in charge, and the evil gods could not stir up any storms. However, the New World had no righteous gods, and the evil gods gathered in large numbers, and even the evil god candidates were not rare. Charlotte was really quite curious, and he was getting familiar with his teammates. Charlotte already knew that they came from the Golden Kite Academy. The New World did not have a stratified education system like the Old World. It only had a first-level college education, which taught not only cultural courses, but also martial arts and extraordinary knowledge, and the school system lasted for 12 years. He could also understand that for a continent that needed to rely on having more children to fight against the evil gods, education could not be carried out step by step, and could only take a quick route, so these boys and girls were exposed to extraordinary knowledge very early. But this was actually not conducive to going further on the extraordinary road, because the extraordinary would be polluted, and the children's resistance was weak, so the probability of them achieving extraordinary would be low, and their future achievements would be limited. But, the people in the New World probably had no choice. The extraordinary knowledge taught by the Golden Kite Academy is relatively simple, not as profound as that of the New World. There are only a dozen knight paths and some mage inheritance. Well, as for the inheritance of bloodthirsty fighting spirit? This is a coincidence. When Domitian traveled in the New World, he taught in more than a dozen academies. The Golden Kite Academy happened to be one of them. He left the Beast God transformation and bloodthirsty fighting spirit in the Golden Kite Academy. When Charlotte learned about this, he was quite amused. He really didn't expect to meet the students of the Old Leopard Man in the Evil God Arena. A voice suddenly sounded in the hall. In 20 minutes, the shelter will be open. You will face the monsters wandering in the deserted city and kill them. The first team to kill 10 monsters will win and get a divine fragment. Each monster has a chance to extract weapons, armor, magic cores, divine fragments, power runes, etc., which are also your spoils of war. The atmosphere in the hall suddenly became tense, and everyone was checking their weapons again. Charlotte found that no one had extraordinary weapons here. She guessed that there was a rule in the Evil God Arena that extraordinary weapons could not be brought in. Most of the people carried broadswords, two-handed swords, shotguns, daggers, and even bows and arrows. The most popular knight's lance in the Old World was probably inconvenient to carry, so no one used it. Only 2 people carried rapiers. Even in the Old World, rapiers were not very popular when adventuring in the wild. This was a problem of weapon applicability. Charlotte took out 2 magnum hand shuttles and pretended to check them. There was no way. His weapons were all in the mirror world. He didn't carry any weapons. Taking out 2 magnum hand shuttles was already the limit. He couldn't take out 2 rapiers or knight's lances. That would be too eye-catching. Soon, a door appeared on the 4 walls of the hall, which originally had no entrances and exits. Each team tacitly chose a different direction. Una hesitated for a moment and chose the exit on the left. The 5 people just walked out, and the door behind them disappeared. The surroundings were pitch black, and there was no light. Charlotte hesitated. Although he could move freely in the dark with his insight, he didn't like the dark very much. Just as he was thinking about how to get some light, there was a slight light around him, and a torch was lit. The one holding the torch was another girl in the team, named Penny. Compared with Una, she was more taciturn and had a plain appearance, but she had a good figure. The clothes she wore were the best among the young people in terms of texture and workmanship. From the faint smell of kerosene emanating from the torch, Charlotte judged that this torch should be made by special means, which could be burned for several hours and was quite expensive. Both teenagers exclaimed softly, obviously quite happy, but Una was slightly surprised. She obviously noticed that the torch Penny took out was a little expensive. Although more than 5 people in this small team came from the Golden Kite Academy, they were not particularly familiar with each other. Una and the other 2 teenagers knew each other when they were in the academy, but they were not familiar with Penny. This girl usually went alone and had almost no friends, and no one knew her situation. Of course, Charlotte was even less familiar with him. His previous performance made everyone in the team think that he was timid, weak, had no ideas, spoke unclearly, and was probably a little mentally ill. Charlotte did not show himself, mainly because he wanted to observe what the Evil God Arena was like. He felt that this thing seemed to be harmless. The insight ability suddenly gave a warning. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 486, Evil God Preliminary Selection and Evil God Candidate. Una didn't react at all. Although the 2 boys looked alert, they were unaware. Penny's little hand touched the pistol on her thigh, but Charlotte almost subconsciously shot back and blew up a round object. After the round object was blown up, disgust and juice came out, corroding the ground and making it smoke. Una couldn't help but screamed, "It's a highly poisonous human head." The two boys were also shocked. They each put their two-handed long swords forward and took an attacking posture. Charlotte took a look and saw that this thing did look a bit like a human head, covered with various small tubes, which could probably spray out the venom in the body. It was hard to say whether the low-level extraordinary protective fighting spirit could resist this highly poisonous juice. Penny walked over with a torch, put it on the ground, and lit the monster. Una then remembered that she had been taught in the academy that if you encounter a monster like the poisonous human head, you must set it on fire because it has tiny spores in its body. If they are dispersed, they will parasitize nearby creatures. She blushed slightly and whispered, "Penny, you are still meticulous." The two teenagers also remembered the knowledge they had learned in the course, and they showed fear after realizing it. Charlotte didn't have time to care about these young people. A prompt appeared in front of him. 1/26942. Charlotte hesitated for a moment, and her insight expanded. She fired another shot, killing a short monster hiding 150 steps away on the spot. Sure enough, the number became 2/26942. He couldn't help but curse inwardly. "How many are you going to kill? I don't have enough bullets." "Well, forget it. I still have the blood flame magic gun. I can't just keep using the magnum handgun." "Well, if we don't use the gun, we might kill faster." The four young men were stunned. Under the light of the torch, they could hardly see a monster more than 10 steps away. Charlotte could actually kill a monster 150 steps away with one shot? What level is this? The shooting instructors in the academy don't have this ability. Charlotte noticed the expressions of the four teammates and could only fill in the gaps. "I took the elective course of chanting Hayato and awakened the Hawkeye ability." Although the young people still felt that it was not reasonable, just having Hawkeye could not explain this amazing shooting skill, right? But it seemed that they could barely accept it. After all, shooting skills were a skill that could be achieved by chance. The poisonous head was quickly burned into a ball of ashes. Penny stretched out her foot to poke it and actually found a short dagger in the ashes. She said, "This is the monster killed by Jin Nan. I suggest that this dagger belongs to him." Una and the two teenagers said they had no objection, but Charlotte said, "I don't know how to use a dagger, and this thing is not worth much. Just throw it here." Well, he really doesn't know how to use a dagger, and this thing is indeed not worth much, but the eyes of the four young people still changed a little, because, except for Penny, everyone actually has no money. The residents of the New World are generally poorer than those of the Old World. This dagger is considered a fine product and can be sold for at least a dozen centimes. No one in the New World mints coins, and the currency in circulation is the same as that in the New World. Among them, the gold pound, shilling and penny of Englamer account for half of the currency in circulation in the New World, and the écu, fort and centime of Fars account for 40% of the currency in circulation. The currencies of these two empires are more accepted by the residents of the New World. The currencies of the other three empires are relatively unpopular because of their average naval strength and relatively few immigrants. Una couldn't help but say, "Why don't we collect them and calculate the harvest after we leave the arena, and distribute them according to the number of enemies killed?" This time no one objected. Charlotte didn't want to play with this group of kids anymore. He didn't come to participate in the evil gout arena. He wanted to sweep the monsters in the entire dungeon and pass the fourth maze. Although according to the prompts, he might have to kill more than 20,000 monsters, but according to the two killed so far, the monsters here are so weak that it would probably just be a waste of time and it wouldn't be too difficult. He thought to himself, help these kids kill 10 monsters first, and then I'll act alone. Charlotte is a time traveler after all. For him, if he can help with something, he might as well do it. Led by Una, the team first set the short monster on fire. This time, they did not gain anything. They explored forward cautiously, but Charlotte had just fired 2 shots. In this dungeon, the sound of gunfire could be heard far away. Soon, 5 or 6 monsters followed the sound. Under the illumination of the torches, the young people also discovered the monsters. Una whispered, "Everyone be careful, form a formation, and do not act alone." The monsters that followed the sound were tall, charred all over, and even held weapons, looking a bit like Little Boss. Charlotte assessed the level of the monsters and fired 6 shots in a row. All 6 shots hit the tallest and strongest monster, who was obviously the leader, at the center of his brow. The first bullet hit the monster's forehead, and it screamed. The second bullet made the monster's forehead bleed. The gray-black blood looked like it had an unknown composition. The third bullet slightly cracked the monster's forehead bone. The fourth and fifth bullets deepened the crack. The sixth bullet shot the strong monster in the head. This was the top-level shooting technique taught by Juno. Charlotte should have observed the monster's weakness and shot it dead, but he didn't have the patience. It was just an ordinary monster, so it was better to use a simple and rough shooting technique without technical content. 6 shots to the head. For Charlotte, there was no technical content, but for these young people, it was a magical skill, simply unheard of. Una looked at Charlotte with a slightly pale look in her eyes. The attitude of the 2 teenagers changed drastically, and they were humble in their humility. Only Penny looked weird, even a little, well, still weird. With Charlotte, the sharpshooter, the Golden Kite Academy team quickly cleared out the 6 monsters and obtained 3 weapons respectively. It was not a bad harvest. Una was very happy and whispered, "If we kill 2 more monsters, we will complete this preliminary round. We will be safe for at least 1 year from now on." Charlotte was a little surprised and wanted to ask a question, but was afraid of being exposed. Penny said very considerately, "Every year, the Evil God Arena will designate a group of people in all cities to participate in the Evil God preliminary round. There is no way to escape or hide. The winner can go back safely and will not be selected again within a year. The loser will continue to participate in the Evil God preliminary round until he wins, or die. Everyone wants to escape this fate. Only by becoming an Evil God candidate can you have certain privileges. For example, as long as you increase your strength, you can delay the time to enter the Evil God Arena." Penny was very kind, but Charlotte was shocked and broke out in a cold sweat. He was very sure that this girl was different from the other 3 teammates. Chapter 487. Hello Jin Nan, my name is Zimmerman. Penny seemed to sense that Charlotte had discovered something. She smiled sweetly, and was actually quite charming. Charlotte kept muttering in his heart. He really couldn't figure out what this girl was. He could only be more careful. The remaining 2 monsters were easy to make up the numbers. About a few minutes later, another group of monsters rushed over because they heard the gunshots. Charlotte didn't give her companions a chance. With 2 guns in hand, she easily cleared the field and killed the group of monsters. An exit opened behind them. Una quickly set the group of monsters on fire and actually received some divine fragments. She said excitedly, "Let's leave quickly, this time, we will definitely win." The 2 teenagers also nodded frequently, looking very excited. They had all heard that participating in the Evil God Arena was very dangerous, but they didn't expect that with Charlotte's participation, it would be so easy. Charlotte smiled and said, "Everyone, leave quickly." Una and the 2 teenagers took the spoils and just stepped into the shelter. The exit behind them was closed. They were stunned for a long time before they shouted together, "Why didn't Jin Nan and Penny come out?" This had never happened before, and the 3 young people were panicked, but they didn't stay in the shelter for too long, and were sent out of the Evil God Arena by a mysterious force. Una saw the teacher of the academy and couldn't help but rush over and said, "Jin Nan and Penny didn't come out. Teacher, what should we do?" The teacher in charge of this incident at the Golden Kite Academy couldn't help but say, "Only the 3 of you in our academy were chosen by the Evil God, and where did Jin Nan and Penny come from in our academy? I have been a teacher for more than 10 years, and I have never heard of such 2 students." Una and the 2 teenagers looked at each other, and they all felt a chill down their spines. They actually teamed up with? What on earth are those 2 people? Charlotte saw that Penny didn't leave either, and she became a little wary. Seeing how nervous he was, Penny smiled and said, "Let's get to know each other again. Hello, Kyanan, I'm Zimmerman." Charlotte's eyes went dark. He would rather face the 10 evil gods than Zimmerman Axelrobin. He gritted his teeth to prevent himself from asking stupid questions like, "Why are you a woman?" He is now a teenager, using the Beast God transformation technique and bloodthirsty fighting spirit. Charlotte doesn't know whether Zimmerman is familiar with him or not, but Zimmerman certainly doesn't know his true identity. He doesn't dare to be stupid enough to expose himself. Don't look at Charlotte's heroic words. What about really attacking Mettleman? If Zimmerman doesn't intend to force him into a dead end, Charlotte will definitely not commit suicide. Charlotte now had only one thought, "Hello, Jin Nan, I am Jin Nan. I am definitely not Charlotte Mecklen. Zimmerman, I haven't heard of this name. Zimmerman said with a smile. Now you have heard of it, haven't you? Looking at your gun skills and transformation skills, you should have inherited the true teachings of Domitian, but this old guy didn't even teach you the secrets of the leopard tribe. He is still a little secretive. Charlotte really wanted to give Zimmerman a thumbs up. He didn't even know that the old leopard man was also proficient in gun skills. In order not to reveal his true identity, he whispered, Teacher Domitian didn't tell me about his origins. Zimmerman said, he is one of the 7 leaders of the Orc Assassin League of the Old World, a holy level killer, and his assassination methods are unparalleled in the world. Charlotte thought to herself, you have a very high opinion of the old leopard man. I don't think he is that great. Seeing that Charlotte was still a little wary, Zimmerman smiled again, bit his lip, and said, they have all left, and there is no need for me to keep up the disguise. His body glowed slightly, and the skin belonging to Penny was cracked. A girl with a charming smile and a temperament like the most delicate rose in the garden appeared in front of Charlotte. Charlotte almost couldn't control herself, but she shouted in her heart, Senior Mendelman, I don't know how bad Zimmerman's taste is. He said that there is no need to keep up the disguise, but he just changed into color skin. Mendelman Sume is 100 times more beautiful than Penny. Is the title of the first rose of the Empire a blessing? However, this Mendelman is younger than the senior sister Charlotte knows, and has a different style. Well, not so cold, a little bit flirty. There is always a kind of temptation that is there and not there. Charlotte didn't think much about it at first, but after more than 10 seconds, sweat suddenly dripped down his forehead. He glanced at Zimmerman several times and overturned his previous judgment. This lady was definitely not Mendelman. Although her eyebrows and eyes were very similar to Mendelman's, they were slightly different. There was a small teardrop mole under the left corner of her eye, which Mendelman did not have. Zimmerman did not need to change these details, unless, Charlotte said in her heart, he did not change into Mendelman Sr., but into her mother, Mrs. Shirley. Charlotte personally helped Mendelman find the documents about the night window incident and the Imperial Rose incident, so of course she knew about Mrs. Shirley. Although he was not good at gossiping, he had vaguely heard that the mother and daughter looked almost the same, equally beautiful and moving. This small detail suddenly made Charlotte think of a possibility, and she thought to herself, could it be that Zimmerman has not yet recovered all his memories? Is it possible that he really thinks he looks like this, and he has gender confusion? Thinking of this, Charlotte asked tentatively, I have some orc blood, so I only have a name, not a surname. But your name sounds like it only belongs to nobles. You should have a very powerful surname, right? Zimmerman smiled and said, my last name is Sume, Zimmerman Sume. Charlotte couldn't help but secretly complain in her heart, do you have a sister, Mendelman Sume? But he didn't dare to provoke this guy who had caused countless storms. Although it was slightly confirmed that Zimmerman might not have recovered all his memories, who knew what his situation was now? Charlotte quickly changed the topic to a safer one and said, I want to kill all the monsters in the dungeon. Why did you stay? Zimmerman smiled and said, I need divine fragments, all of them. Although Charlotte knew that divine fragments were good things, he really didn't need them, and he didn't want to conflict with such a terrifying guy, so he immediately said, okay, let's cooperate. Zimmerman smiled again. Chapter 488, Level 3 Bloodthirst and Eagle Strike. With the terrifying existence of Zimmerman, Charlotte did not dare to use Bloody Glory. Who knew how much Zimmerman knew about him? What if he recognized him from Bloody Glory and found that he was Charlotte Mecklen, the man who was having an affair with Mendelman? Would that be terrible? Fortunately, Charlotte was really good at fighting with blood. His pistol skills were passed down by Juno. Although the magnum hand shuttle in his hand was a little worse, it was not bad to kill monsters in the underground maze. Moreover, Charlotte found that Zimmerman's strength did not seem to be very strong. This made him feel very strange. Charlotte muttered secretly, isn't he Zimmerman's real body? Isn't this guy human? He can't have a clone. That's the ability of an evil god. Well, evil god, maybe this guy is really an evil god. He's quite evil, but it's still very strange. The two of them fought together to clear more than 10 groups of monsters. Charlotte did not take the divine fragment, but she found 2 handy weapons. One is a fine rapier, and the other is a set of flying knives. Charlotte has also practiced flying knives. Although his flying knife skills are average, this skill is just right for the level of second-level bloodthirsty fighting spirit. Zimmerman smiled lightly, and the little divine fragment on his delicate jade hand was swallowed by him with his red lips gently opened. The aura on his body was significantly improved. Zimmerman glanced at Charlotte and said, "I have been promoted to the 5th level extraordinary." Charlotte felt a chill on her back. The 5th level extraordinary was not scary, but the 5th level Zimmerman was too scary. No, what's going on with him now? This doesn't look like Zimmerman himself, nor does it look like a clone. If Charlotte hadn't just been hit by fate, he would really want to pray to the snake of fate. He felt that his teacher Juno might not be able to answer the doubts in his heart, but this fun snake could definitely. After all, he is one of the 9 righteous gods, and his rank is much higher than that of any evil god. Charlotte thought for a long time and gave up this idea in dismay. He took a deep breath and circulated his bloodthirsty fighting spirit. His bones made a slight crackling sound. The bloodthirsty fighting spirit in his body suddenly exploded, and a stream of blood flowed around his body. Charlotte's bloodthirsty fighting spirit was also promoted, and he stepped into the 3rd level openly, and a bloodthirsty rune was condensed in his body, Eagle Strike. Eagle Strike, like light agility and leopard agility, is a speed-type ability. However, Eagle Strike is an explosive skill, shorter and more violent than the leopard's agility burst, just like an eagle swooping down from the sky and attacking its prey, as fast as thunder and lightning. If it is a close combat, Eagle Strike is equivalent to a special move, but when used in gunfighting, Eagle Strike becomes a magic skill. Because shooting only requires a momentary burst, Eagle Strike allows Charlotte to shoot nearly 3 times faster, about 2 times or 8 times faster. If it weren't for the fact that weapons like the Magnum hand shuttle were so lame, Charlotte would have grabbed almost no monsters that could survive a round of shooting. Zimmerman was surprised and whispered, "I have never seen anyone with such a strong talent as you." Charlotte was very upset and thought, "I have seen many. If you are not teasing me, how can I compare with you?" After the two of them upgraded, Zimmerman did not continue to fight and suggested taking a break. Charlotte saw that he was indeed sweating profusely, but that strange feeling was lingering. She didn't believe that he was really tired, but he would never say that he didn't want to rest, which was so unemotional. Charlotte encouraged her bloodthirsty fighting spirit, slapped the ground, blew away the dust, made a clean ground, and sat on it. He didn't dare to use the infinite mirror world, and he was a little worried because he couldn't take out the food, water and supplies he prepared, and didn't know how to maintain a long battle. More than 20,000 monsters, it would take at least a month to kill. With Zimmerman by his side, what should he do next? Charlotte didn't know what to do in her heart. Instead, Zimmerman took out a small cloth bag, pulled out a bottle of water and a piece of bread, drank a sip, handed the bottle to Charlotte, broke the bread and handed him a piece. Charlotte took the bottle and saw a faint lip mark on the bottle mouth. She turned it quietly, then raised her head and drank it all, returned the bottle to Zimmerman, and ate the bread in big mouthfuls. Zimmerman behaved very politely, just like a real noble lady, completely different from when she played Penny just now. Charlotte ate up the bread and couldn't help asking, "Are you from the New World?" Zimmerman nodded and said, "My parents sent me to the New World when I was very young. Aunt Murphy brought me up. I have never seen my father or my mother, and I don't know their situation." Charlotte nodded and thought, "Sure enough, there's still some problem with your memory." He continued to ask, "The extraordinary path you are taking is a bit unusual." Zimmerman smiled lightly and said, "Of course, there are very few people in the New World who take this extraordinary path. I am learning the popular extraordinary secret method in the Old World, which was also taught to me by Aunt Murphy since I was a child. I actually want to go to the Old World to take a look. I want to find my parents and ask them why they left me. However, with my strength, I probably can't reach the Old World. When I collect enough divine fragments and become a mid-level extraordinary, I will definitely go to the Old World to take a look." Charlotte thought to herself, "You'd better not go back. Some time ago, you appeared in the Golden Temple and almost scared me out of my wits. I believe that I am not the only one who was frightened by your appearance in the Old World and had nightmares in the middle of the night. I am afraid that Axel, the former royal family of Fars, and Brittany now will be terrified, even if my father-in-law is the strongest man in Fars, and my brother-in-law Antonio is the strongest man in Fars in the future. They can't stand your threats." Charlotte said tactfully, "The Old World is not good." Zimmerman hummed and did not continue the topic. The two of them used their secret methods and soon recovered their strength. Zimmerman suggested to continue, and Charlotte readily agreed. The two killed 4 groups of monsters again and finally encountered a strong enemy. It was a 6th-level extraordinary monster with more than 10 small monsters. In fact, most of the monsters in the dungeon are ordinary. Except for their natural brute force and some skills, they are not extraordinary. But this monster with sharp spikes all over its body, like a wild boar, is obviously extraordinary. Charlotte tried to shoot several times, but found that a Magnum hand shuttle and ordinary bullets could not penetrate this level of monster. It was not a problem of gunfighting skills, but his weapon was too poor. Charlotte could only put away the 2 Magnum hand shuttles and pulled out the rapier he had picked up. Chapter 489, Seats in the Backcourt. The swordplay that Charlotte was most familiar with was naturally the Angel Thorn of Asilo. This extraordinary swordplay had helped him to establish countless achievements and killed many powerful enemies. However, with Zimmerman by his side, he could only use the swordplay that he had studied at the Behemoth National Academy. However, his swordplay was strong, and even an ordinary swordplay could be used in Charlotte's hands to be magnificent and aggressive. Although this 6th level monster was powerful, Charlotte had Eagle Strike, which allowed her to attack at any time and trip the monster by herself. Zimmerman did not come to help, but cleared the little monsters at the fastest speed. His brilliant fighting spirit showed that he had learned the authentic courses of the Royal Hogwitch University's brilliant breathing method and the Great Light God meditation technique. His fighting spirit was subtle and vigorous, and his meditation skills were authentic and magnificent. That's right, Zimmerman Axel Robin was a rare genius at the Royal Hogwitch University in a century. Zimmerman, who had just been promoted to the 5th level of extraordinary, was very skilled in controlling his newly acquired power. He definitely didn't look like someone who had just been promoted. Well, even if the evil god came, he would not believe that Zimmerman was only at the 5th level. In just a few minutes, Zimmerman killed more than 10 monsters and obtained 2 divine fragments. At this time, although Charlotte was still at ease, it was really difficult to kill the 6th level monster with only the 3rd level of bloodthirsty fighting spirit, especially since he didn't dare to use all his superpowers now. He could only use Eagle Eye and Eagle Strike, and even his swordsmanship was just ordinary stuff. Charlotte now knew how big the difference in strength could be for the same level of extraordinary, different superpowers, and different weapons. If he had changed to Bloody Glory, he would have killed this monster long ago. If he had another extraordinary weapon, he could easily defeat even if there were 2 or 3 monsters of the same level. Zimmerman did not immediately engage in the battle, but first performed a few restorative brilliant breathing methods, checked his weapons, and tidied his shoes. Then he gave a light shout and joined the battle with his sword. Zimmerman used a 2-handed broadsword common only seen in the New World. It was different from the rapier style popular in the Old World, and his moves were more fierce and violent. He cut off one of the monster's hind legs with one sword. It was obvious that Zimmerman had planned this sword for a long time. He was not only simply repairing it, but also observing the monster's weaknesses. This monster was a typical 4-legged monster. 4-legged monsters meant that a lack of a leg would greatly reduce its mobility. Charlotte didn't even need to use the Eagle Strike, and his speed was faster than this monster. He used his 3rd level bloodthirsty fighting spirit to go around behind the monster and cut off the other hind leg of the monster with one sword. With the 2 hind legs cut off, the monster could only roll on the ground and scream at the top of its voice. However, although this rolling on the ground completely deprived the monster of its attack power, it also made it difficult for Charlotte and Zimmerman to attack. Both of them had experience and withdrew their distance. Charlotte blinded the monster's eyes with 2 shots. Zimmerman stretched out 2 fingers and pressed them on her forehead. After a while, her forehead and fingers glowed with strange light. Charlotte knew that this was a killing move of the Radiant Secret method. She shrugged her shoulders and stepped aside. Sure enough, after a while, Zimmerman accumulated enough strength and emitted a ray of light, piercing the monster's brain. This move took too long to accumulate power, so it was almost useless in actual combat, but this kind of attack on a fixed target was almost 20% to 30% of the power of the demon-breaking armor bomb. 2 divine fragments and a group of runes were extracted from the wreckage of the monster. Zimmerman collected the 2 divine fragments and handed the group of runes to Charlotte, saying, "What a coincidence, it's the orc's ability. I can't use it, but you need it very much." Charlotte didn't actually need the orc's ability. He practiced Bloody Glory, but after taking this bloodthirsty rune, he checked it and took it into his body. This bloodthirsty rune is Murderous Intent. It is an auxiliary ability, and it is not selective about race. Any orc can condense it. In other words, no matter what kind of orc he transforms into, this rune can emerge and can be used. However, the scope of application of the evil intention is limited. It can only use the fierce thoughts to deter the enemy. Most middle and high-level extraordinary people are immune to the evil intention. Even if facing low-level extraordinary people, it is not very useful and has limited impact on the battle. Zimmerman said to Charlotte, "If we can keep killing and kill all the monsters in this dungeon, will our strength improve by leaps and bounds and we will both be promoted to high level?" Charlotte shrugged and said, "Maybe, but we have to continue fighting. They have been fighting with this 6th level monster for so long that a large number of monsters have long been stalking." As soon as Charlotte finished speaking, more than 10 monsters came over with a shaky step. Charlotte saw that it was an undead corpse monster, so she changed to the Magnum hand shuttle and shot one by one, destroying all the monsters. The corpse monster has low defense. In addition to being a little disgusting, it is very easy to kill. Zimmerman walked over and set all the corpse monsters on fire, but he got nothing this time. He was not discouraged and took Charlotte to another place. There were too many monsters attracted to this direction. They were all low-level extraordinary and could not face so many monsters at once. The two of them ran into 2 groups of monsters in succession, both of which were non-extraordinary types. After killing them, they did not get any spoils. However, both of them knew that they should recover their physical strength, so they did not continue to fight and found a secluded corner to rest. Zimmerman still provided water. Charlotte took out a piece of cloth and carefully wiped the rapier in her hand. Although this weapon could barely be called a fine product, it was not an extraordinary weapon after all. After killing dozens of monsters, it was already quite damaged. It was unknown how long it could last in the next battle. Charlotte thought to himself, "If this rapier is damaged, I can only use the set of throwing knives." Charlotte did not throw all the throwing knives, just so that if the weapon in his hand was damaged, he would still have a handy weapon. The throwing knife technique he learned not only includes throwing skills, but also short-range fighting skills. The two rested for a while and stepped into the battle again. Charlotte did not notice that there was a faint silver halo on his back, as if a small silver snake was winding around. The little snake seemed to be overjoyed, just like sitting in the front row of a concert and being able to shake hands with the stars. Charlotte and Zimmerman joined forces and fought 7 or 8 more games. Zimmerman accumulated enough divine fragments and was promoted again, breaking through to the 6th level. Charlotte's bloodthirsty fighting spirit was cultivated through real practice. Although he was a high-level extraordinary, he would practice much faster, but it was definitely not as fast as swallowing divine fragments. Although he was a little envious, he did not think too much. Chapter 490, Mirror Sage. Magic Weapon. Charlotte and Zimmerman teamed up to kill a supernatural monster. This time, after they set the monster on fire, they got a supernatural weapon, a 2-handed battle axe. Zimmerman's mouth flattened slightly and said, "Neither of us is suitable for this weapon." Charlotte hesitated for a moment and said, "I have actually practiced other orc transformations." He grabbed the 2-man battle axe, growled, and his body gradually changed, turning into a crossback red bear warrior. The bloodthirsty fighting spirit was seamlessly transformed and maintained the 3rd order level. Charlotte could feel another bloodthirsty rune taking shape in her body, Violent. Transformed into a crossback red bear warrior, Charlotte has 3 bloodthirsty runes, Bear Power, Violent and Fierce. Violence can be used for an explosion, which can increase combat effectiveness by 20% to 30%, and physical strength, speed, and strength are all improved, but it will also make the brain hot. What surprised Charlotte a little was that the 2 bloodthirsty runes of Berserk and Fierceness could be transformed into Super Berserk. With a Super Berserk posture, the combat power of the Red Bear Warrior could be increased by more than 50%, almost equivalent to upgrading. The 3rd level Extraordinary could exert the combat power of the 4th level. However, in the Super Berserk state, the body load is too large, and the combat time will be shortened a lot. If the battle lasts a little longer, it will cause damage to the body. This is not a problem for Charlotte. His spirituality is very high and he will not lose control. He can end the Berserk or Super Berserk state at any time. Zimmerman showed a somewhat incredible expression. After a long time, he shook his head slightly, as if he had seen something incredible. This extraordinary level 2-handed battle axe, that is, the weapon of the 1st level of the extraordinary, has only one attribute, which is sharp. However, this 2-handed battle axe was really a killer weapon in the hands of Charlotte, who could transform into a red bear warrior. They encountered 7 or 8 groups of monsters in a row, but none of them could match Charlotte's 2-handed battle axe. Even 2 of the 4th-level extraordinary monsters could not resist a single move. Although Charlotte's bloodthirsty fighting spirit was only the 3rd level, with bear power and super violence, he could only barely burst out the strength of the 4th level, but his real martial arts value was the full 18th level, and there was almost no opponent below the holy level. His martial arts skills were taught by Zeus, Julian, Juno and others, and they were refined by thousands of hammers. The flaws that ordinary low-level extraordinary people could not see were clear to him, not to mention all kinds of exquisite moves and rich experience in facing the enemy. After Charlotte killed a monster wrapped in rags, he took a look at the prompt. 2176-26942. He couldn't help but complain in a low voice, "Why have we only killed so few? Not even 1/10. He and Zimmerman have been killing in the dungeon for 2 or 3 days. At the current speed, it will probably take more than a month to get out." However, Charlotte also found that the monsters they encountered were getting stronger and stronger. Although most of them were ordinary monsters, the number of encounters with extraordinary monsters was increasing. It is very likely that in a few days, they will encounter monsters that require a very difficult fight to kill. In the future, they are more likely to encounter monsters that cannot be killed no matter what, and even have to run for their lives. The 3rd-level extraordinary is too weak. Zimmerman's 6th-level extraordinary is not much stronger than me. If I can get rid of Zimmerman, I can easily flatten this dungeon with my 18th-level strength. Zimmerman once again expressed his desire to rest, and Charlotte could only accompany him to find a place to rest and recover his strength. Zimmerman provided Charlotte with water as usual. Charlotte lifted the orc transformation, drank some water, ate something, and secretly practiced Bloody Glory for a while. He did not waste this time. He practiced Bloody Glory every day. However, it was difficult to make progress after reaching the 18th level. After practicing for a few hours, Charlotte was about to disperse Bloody Glory, but suddenly his eyes hurt slightly, and another silver rune condensed. After his infinite mirror realm condensed the 6th rune Mirror Demon, although he still invested a lot of Agmaris Labyrinth pages, there was no movement. Although Charlotte also worked hard to practice during this period, he did not hold much hope. Unexpectedly, at this moment, the infinite mirror realm broke through. The 7th infinite mirror realm rune, Mirror Sage. Mirror Sage, a magical life created with endless knowledge. He can use magic, respond to various problems, become the best think tank, and even serve as a tutor. Charlotte was greatly surprised. He did not expect that the breakthrough of the infinite mirror realm would be in this direction. He quietly created a magic mirror, shook it slightly, and saw a hot, sexy and enchanting woman in the mirror. The magic robe on her body was exposed, which was a perfect interpretation of the bikini robe. Charlotte was slightly surprised and thought to herself, should it be an old man? This kind of sage doesn't look like a serious sage. Maybe I'm not serious enough. No, it's impossible. I must be a serious person. Charlotte couldn't ask the mirror sage in front of Zimmerman. What's wrong with her? Why is the gender wrong? After dispersing the magic mirror in her hand, Charlotte felt vaguely that the mirror sage looked familiar. After a while, he suddenly remembered who this female sage looked like. Ms. Black Moon. She is like the Black Moon goddess. How can this be? What's going on? Is the sage in my mind like a goddess? Charlotte recalled the first time she saw Ms. Black Moon. No one could describe her appearance. All the words in the world pale in comparison to her. No one could draw her spirit. All the painting techniques of time would appear so rough in front of her. But Ms. Black Moon was very petite, while his mirror sage was hot and sexy. The two were similar in appearance, from temperament to figure, from style to personality, from every move to demeanor. There was no similarity. The problem was that Charlotte had never thought of blaspheming God. This is really bad. Is there something wrong with me? Impossible. Absolutely impossible. I'm not an old pervert, and I've never had any fantasies about goddesses. It must be. Charlotte suddenly felt a chill on her back and dared not think about it anymore. The silver halo behind him was originally condensed for a moment, and even began to emit a dangerous aura. When he decided not to continue thinking about it, the silver light circle slowly spun again, as if it had done something proud, spinning very happily, very, very happily. Charlotte took a deep breath and turned into a crossback red bear warrior again. The bloodthirsty fighting spirit surged through his body, and he inexplicably felt a little safe. For the first time, Charlotte realized that it was hard to say whether he would become an evil god if he continued to practice Bloody Glory, but he would definitely offend a righteous God. Chapter 491, Ice Death Knight. Zimmerman swallowed 2 divine fragments, and his aura surged. He was promoted to the next level again and entered the middle-level extraordinary realm. Charlotte didn't envy him, but he was obviously more afraid of this companion. He was also a high-level extraordinary, but he still had to follow the steps to cultivate bloodthirsty fighting spirit. Although it was much faster than ordinary orcs, he still couldn't skip the necessary practice steps. But Zimmerman could continuously improve his extraordinary level by swallowing divine fragments. This kind of thing was beyond his common sense. Even in the extraordinary world, some common sense couldn't be easily broken. Charlotte could only say that he was more and more certain that this Zimmerman was not a human, and it was 9 out of 10, him. Charlotte held a 2-handed battle axe and played an axe flower casually. He had also changed the long sword on his waist, which was also a first-level extraordinary long sword, not the standard of the old continent, so he didn't change the 2-handed battle axe. Zimmerman took a long breath and said, "I finally became a mid-level extraordinary." There was a strange look on his face, as if he was remembering something from the past. Charlotte didn't dare to let him recall the past, and hurriedly interrupted Zimmerman's thoughts and said, "We have cleared almost 1/5 of the monsters. If you clear all the monsters in the dungeon, you might be able to become a high-level extraordinary." Zimmerman smiled and said, "Is it unfair to you that I took all the divine fragments?" Charlotte shook her head and said, "There is no unfairness in things that have been discussed. I need to clear all the monsters in the dungeon, and you need a lot of divine fragments. We originally took what we needed." Zimmerman looked at Charlotte with a complicated expression, and his eyes were slightly resentful. Charlotte looked upright, and he didn't dare to play any tricks with him. If he hadn't been unable to leave now, Charlotte would have parted ways with Zimmerman long ago. He had to clear all the monsters and then turn this underground deserted city into a maze, so that he could pass the 4th maze and find the exit. Zimmerman said lightly, "Let's continue." Charlotte took the lead, leaving Zimmerman behind, and soon they encountered a group of monsters. This group of monsters was extremely fast and could spit venom. They looked like rats that were magnified hundreds of times. Zimmerman's pretty face turned pale when he saw this kind of monster, but Charlotte was not afraid. He used this weapon for a long time and learned the axe skills from his subordinates, the Red Bear warriors, and he had reached perfection. He swung 3 axes in a row, each one faster than the last, and killed 3 monsters in a row. The remaining monsters chirped and fled in all directions. Charlotte did not chase them. There were too many monsters in the underground city. It was inefficient to chase and kill such monsters. Anyway, as long as he pushed forward all the way, there would never be monsters on the road. He planned to kill most of the monsters in the underground and then clean up these sporadic monsters. Charlotte looked back and thought, why is Zimmerman becoming more and more feminine? Has he suddenly realized the principle of yin and yang, the growth of all things, and opened the door to a new world? Zimmerman's face flushed slightly, and he whispered, "I'm a little afraid of mice." Charlotte hummed and didn't respond. He didn't know how to answer such a topic. Should he hug this big boss who might have been promoted to the evil god and gently comfort him not to be afraid? He is not that good at seeking death. Is it him who is afraid now? Can mice be as scary as evil gods? The atmosphere between the two was slightly awkward, but it soon eased, because a team of knights appeared in the distance. Their bodies were hazy and transparent, and there was a group of cold air coming from a long distance. Charlotte whispered, "It's the Ice Undead Knight, a very rare species." Zimmerman said, "I'll deal with him. He is a shining knight, and his attributes are naturally undead. His actions are much more suitable than Charlotte's." Charlotte took a step back. His bloodthirsty fighting spirit was indeed not very effective against the undead. Zimmerman swung his 2-handed sword. Although he looked like a slender girl, his swordsmanship was very powerful. With a 2-handed sword with glorious fighting spirit, it was as fast as a gust of wind and cut off an Ice Undead Knight in half. This Ice Undead Knight was immune to most physical damage, but it was vulnerable to the glorious fighting spirit with opposite attributes. Zimmerman killed an Ice Undead Knight with ease and still had some strength to spare, but he was soon blocked by the second Ice Undead Knight. This Undead Knight was at the middle and high level, and had already exceeded the 10th level. Even though Zimmerman's attributes were opposite, it was not afraid. The two sides fought fiercely for 7 or 8 rounds. The remaining 20 or so undead knights surrounded Zimmerman and trapped him tightly. He soon became exhausted and in danger. Although Charlotte also hoped that these ice undead knights could do something to Zimmerman, his reason told him that it was very likely that they would only kill a layer of Zimmerman's skin, which would not only fail to solve the problem, but also summon the real big boss. Charlotte did not want to face Zimmerman, who had recovered his memory. Seeing this, he did not dare to continue to watch. He waved his two-handed battle axe and joined the battle. Among the more than 20 ice undead knights, there were 4 extraordinary ones. Except for the leader, who was at the middle and high level, the other 3 extraordinary ones were low level, but at least at the level of the 5th or 6th level, and their combat power was fierce. Charlotte adopted the tactics that Zimmerman had used before. He did not entangle with the 3 extraordinary ice undead knights at all, and directly entered the super violent state, one axe at a time, and killed all the miscellaneous soldiers first. After killing more than 20 ordinary ice undead knights, Charlotte lifted the super violent state, fought and walked away, and led the remaining 3 ice undead knights away. With Charlotte's level 3 bloodthirsty fighting spirit, it was impossible for him to kill 3 level 5 or 6 ice undead knights in a 1-on-3 battle. However, when he led the 3 monsters away, he laughed grimly, released his transformation, and burst out with his level 18 bloody glory. With one charge, he smashed the 3 low-level and high-level ice undead knights into pieces. Charlotte made a flower with his two-handed battle axe and said lightly, "It seems like I'm using my real strength to flatten this dungeon." He was about to save Zimmerman. But his eyes flashed slightly and he saw a faint glow in the 3 smash ice undead knights. He walked over and found 3 divine fragments, and collected them without hesitation. Charlotte used this tactic to kill hundreds of monsters. When no one was watching, he would naturally not give the divine fragments that fell to Zimmerman again. Charlotte has now collected more than 100 fragments of divinity. He has tried it. Although this thing can be used for cultivation, even with his high-level extraordinary strength of the 18th level, it will take 1 or 2 months to digest one. Moreover, it only slightly increases the speed of cultivation. It is impossible to absorb it directly like Zimmerman and get promoted immediately. Chapter 492, the third magic contract document. This discovery made Charlotte more certain that Zimmerman was not a human being, but only him. He killed 3 ice undead knights, and when he rushed back, Zimmerman was still fighting with the high mid-level ice undead knight. The difference between the two was at least 3 levels, but Zimmerman was not at a disadvantage in the scene. After Charlotte appeared, he threw a two-handed battle axe directly and cut off the legs of the high mid-level ice undead knight. Zimmerman added a sword and killed this stubborn enemy. The dead ice undead knight turned into cold mist and dissipated, leaving only a two-handed sword on the spot, surrounded by cold air, obviously not an ordinary item. In the dungeon of the City of Desolation, very few monsters would drop extraordinary weapons. Zimmerman reached out and grabbed the two-handed greatsword, and immediately praised it with a good sound. He waved it and asked, "You can use it." Charlotte shook her head and said, "I'm not good at using this kind of greatsword." Zimmerman was not polite and replaced his sword. Charlotte was indeed not good at using this two-handed greatsword, as well as the broadsword that was very popular in the New World. He was better at using the rapier, but if he really needed to use it, it was not impossible. However, he had a two-handed battle axe, so there was no need to compete with Zimmerman for this weapon. Besides, he didn't care about such an extraordinary weapon. Charlotte casually slapped it, trying to dispel the cold air that the ice undead knight had after his death, but he found a scroll. He grabbed it curiously, and when he opened it to read it, his heart skipped a beat. This was a magic contract document. He had obtained 2 copies before, one for the Golden Goat Rolf and one for the Silverback Gorilla Chiudelo, giving him 2 more 22nd level Saint level strong fighters. It was really surprising that a magic contract document could appear in this dungeon. Charlotte pretended to be casual and said, "A magic scroll, do you want it?" Zimmerman had just obtained a two-handed sword of the ice system. He waved his hand and said, "It's yours." Charlotte put away the magic contract document without showing any expression, and thought to herself, "Who is suitable for this thing, Medafis? When I go back to Fars, he will probably be dead. Mossert is almost the same. Antonio may have killed him long ago. Well, Zimmerman is not good. I'm afraid something will happen." Charlotte hasn't even found a target for the mirror demon, so naturally, she still can't find a suitable candidate for the third magic contract document. However, his subordinates have heard too much about the saint rank now, so he is not in a hurry to subdue new subordinates. Moreover, he could now make the saints surrender purely by his personal charisma. For example, Vigo, Ogon, and several Black Phoenix nobles really didn't need such a small trick as the magic contract document. Charlotte gestured to Zimmerman, indicating that he would continue to attack. Zimmerman also gestured back, indicating that he had no problem. The two continued to advance for a few hundred steps, and then heard an extremely noisy sound. Charlotte changed back to human form. In this form, he could secretly use the light agility technique and sneak over first. Not long after, Charlotte saw a monster's nest, with about a few hundred monsters. These monsters were covered with green skin and short stature. But several leaders were tall and held a magic staff with a flag hanging on it. They were obviously wizards and shamans. Charlotte quietly retreated and said to Zimmerman, "There are too many monsters. We can't beat them at all." One of them had just been promoted to the 7th level, and the other could only use the 3rd level bloodthirsty fighting spirit. Facing hundreds of monsters, it was indeed a bit difficult. Zimmerman whispered, "Let's find a place to rest first." Charlotte nodded, and the two of them moved away from the monster's lair and found a place to rest. Charlotte practiced for a while, then found an excuse to leave, and soon he returned to the monster's lair. Charlotte waved a two-handed battle axe, spat on the ground, activated the bloody glory, turned into a whirlwind, and killed into the middle of the monsters. Charlotte, who pretended to be Jin Nan, certainly didn't dare to do it, but the real Charlotte was fearless. The dozens of monsters in front of them didn't even have time to blink before they were rolled into meat sauce by the axe light. A green-skinned monster shaman raised his hand and fired a flame bomb, but Charlotte Mecklen didn't even look at it. He slapped the flame bomb away with his two-handed battle axe and split the monster leader in half with an axe. It didn't take Charlotte much effort to kill hundreds of monsters. In just half an instant of time, he killed all the monsters, harvested more than 10 divine fragments, and a spear-like weapon, and left calmly. He returned to the resting place and shouted in a slightly excited tone, "I just went to pee and met a monster. I killed it and got this short spear. This spear-like weapon is much shorter than the knight's spear." Charlotte is not used to it at all. If it weren't for the fact that it is an extraordinary weapon, he would not have taken it back. Zimmerman took a look at the short spear and couldn't help but his eyes lit up slightly. He said, "You can't use it, just give it to me." Charlotte really gave the short spear to Zimmerman. This is a 2nd-level extraordinary weapon with the 2 attributes of swiftness and sharpness. It is really suitable for Zimmerman's fighting style. The New World is not popular at all because it is inconvenient to carry, but this short spear that is more than 1 person tall is very popular. He has a very good short spear technique. Charlotte didn't think so. What's wrong with just giving him a 2nd-level extraordinary weapon? He had given a legendary warship before. He also gave Antonio a holy dragon beating stick. But Zimmerman obviously felt differently. When Charlotte said she didn't want a divine fragment, she really didn't want any. Even when she went out alone to kill monsters, she would bring back 1 or 2 divine fragments to him. For example, if she encountered a suitable weapon, she would not hide it herself, but would ask him. He stroked the short spear with a smile on his face, and I don't know what he was thinking. Charlotte didn't feel anything at first, but she felt more and more creepy. He hurriedly urged, "Let's go hunt monsters again, wait until our strength is improved a little more, and then come back to destroy this monster nest." Zimmerman agreed, put on the short spear, held the ice sword in both hands, and followed Charlotte's footsteps. After more than 10 battles, Charlotte finally took another step forward. Her bloodthirsty fighting spirit was promoted to the 4th level, and she awakened a new ability, Thick Skin. Thick Skin, as the name implies, is a power that can make a bear man's skin and flesh thicker, and is considered a defensive power. Although Thick Skin is very useful for ordinary bear men, it does not increase Charlotte's combat power much, as he rarely gets injured due to his superb martial arts skills. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 493 Charlotte in Full Combat Form. 6736/26942. Charlotte glanced at the prompts, and still felt that the end was endless. He couldn't help but mutter, "Why do I feel like I can never finish killing them?" The long fight made Charlotte a little mentally tired. He became a little silent, and his fighting moves became more concise and straightforward. The changes in the moves that were originally there have become straightforward, but this is a fighting skill honed by blood and fire. It is true that great ingenuity is not elaborate, and it is a whole. After killing all the monsters in front of him, Charlotte put away his two-handed battle axe, sat down on the spot, and rested. Zimmerman handed over water and food, and began to become less talkative. After a while, he suddenly said, "I'm leaving." Charlotte nodded, without any reaction at all. Zimmerman whispered, "I originally planned to hunt monsters in the dungeon alone, so the food and water I prepared were only enough for me. With you, our harvest is much greater than mine alone, but the food and water are not enough to support us to continue." Charlotte only reacted at this moment, and her whole body was filled with joy. She said, "I will accompany you to kill until you reach the next level." Zimmerman smiled slightly, indescribably bright and moving, and nodded. After the two rested, they continued to fight. Maybe 1 or 2 days later, or maybe 2 or 3 days later, Zimmerman swallowed enough divine fragments and finally broke through again and was promoted to the 8th level. Charlotte watched this beautiful teammate open the exit and strode out, but did not follow him out. When he turned and walked into the depths of the dungeon, he did not expect that Zimmerman, who had already stepped into the exit, threw a flying kiss to his back. At this time, every cell in Charlotte's body was jumping for joy, and his whole body was filled with joy. His 18th level bloody glory was fully opened, and he began to sweep recklessly. No matter what kind of monster it is, one axe will definitely smash it. He killed more than 10,000 monsters in one day, and then he advanced rapidly at a speed of 1 or 2,000 per day. 5 days later, he encountered several large monster nests. After a bloody battle, he successfully killed more than 20,000 monsters. Charlotte himself did not realize that his whole body was glowing with blood. A long time ago, he stopped devouring vitality for the purity of blood energy, because he did realize that devouring vitality cultivation would make rapid progress at the middle and low levels, but at the high level, it was not only the level of blood energy that affected the breakthrough, but also the spirituality, understanding, and analysis of the essence of power. Blood energy is not pure enough and is very complicated, which is not good for the path of cultivation. But he was full of blood and glory, and he slaughtered so many monsters, so he would naturally absorb the vitality of the enemy. Charlotte turned all this vitality into the burning hand. Such a wild slaughter allowed the burning hand to condense to 18 in one breath. During the battle, the 18 flaming hands each held a weapon, and their efficiency was more than 18 times higher. After all, the flaming hands themselves had no vulnerable points. Charlotte abandoned all the spoils except for the divine fragments, extraordinary weapons, power runes, extraordinary items, and unidentifiable strange items. Anyway, this place would be turned into a maze by him in the future. However, after killing more than 20,000 monsters, Charlotte's advancement began to slow down again. There were almost no monsters wandering around in this underground city. Only 8 of the largest monster nests remained, 3 of which even had more than 1,000 monsters. Even with Charlotte's bravery, it would be a bit difficult to chew. Charlotte stared at one of the monster nests and observed it for 2 days. This monster nest also had an 18th level monster, a giant spider monster. In addition to the leader, there were at least 60 or 70 extraordinary spider monsters. The nest was full of spider webs, which was a headache. In the past 2 days that Charlotte has been cruising nearby, he has killed 70 or 80 spider monsters, and has tried several times to lure the leader spider monster out to fight, but these spider monsters hide at the slightest sign of trouble, and the dense spider webs in their nests block the way, which is very troublesome. Charlotte pressed the blood flame magic gun in his hand. This extraordinary firearm, which is purely materialized by supernatural power, is very similar in shape to the rattlesnake he is used to, but it does not have as many attributes as the red and blue rattlesnake. It can be used with Arthur's blood explosion and Adonis's blazing bullets. The former can make the blood energy bullets endless, and the latter can make the blood energy bullets powerful. No matter what level of extraordinary person, it often takes a whole day without sleep to compress an energy bullet equivalent to a full-strength attack of their own level. At most, they can compress 20 to 30 bullets a year. After all, extraordinary people also need to practice and do various chores. This kind of energy bullet is very precious and will not be used easily. Most extraordinary shooters use psychic bullets 2 or 3 levels lower than their own in daily combat, and love to use physical bullets. With the help of the massacre condensation, Charlotte's blood energy bullet equivalent to his full strength attack has much less loss. He also knows that the opportunity is rare, and he will not encounter a scene where he can kill without restraint in the future. Therefore, after the condensation of the burning hand to 18, he stored a batch of peak 18th level blood energy bullets. He had the urge to force his way in, but after a look at the annoying spider silk, he gave up the idea and thought to himself, how about changing to another monster nest first? As soon as Charlotte had this thought, she saw a spider monster as big as a house coming out of the nest. Its 8 giant feet slid, making a rustling sound, and dozens of small and medium-sized spider monsters followed behind it. It was out for reconnaissance. Charlotte's eyes lit up, and 18 flaming hands floated into the air together, each holding a blood flame magic gun. Charlotte tried several weapons and found that a blood flame magic gun was the most suitable for killing. The spider monster that came out for reconnaissance was hit by more than 10 high-level blood energy bullets as soon as it left the nest. Blood flowers burst all over its body, and it didn't even struggle to death. Its blood and essence withered all over its body, and its body, which was as big as a house, cracked and broke into several large pieces. The small and medium-sized spider monsters that came out with it squeaked and tried to flee, but how could they be faster than Charlotte's gun? Besides, he now had 20 hands, 2 of which were natural and 18 cultivated by secret methods. After a burst of gunshots like popping beans, no spider monster survived. Charlotte blew the muzzle of the gun and was about to give up this nest. He had just killed an extraordinary spider monster that came out to explore the way, and the leader inside would definitely not come out again. Suddenly, he heard an angry female voice, "Why are you killing my descendants?" Chapter 494. Sometimes, even I am afraid of myself. Charlotte was a little surprised and shouted, "You can still speak." The woman's voice shrieked, "I am an 18th level extraordinary creature." Charlotte nodded. An 18th level extraordinary creature is probably equivalent to a monster in the folk legends of the eastern country that has been in existence for 200 or 300 years. It is not surprising that it has some wisdom. Charlotte thought about it and said, "I can also not kill, as long as your entire clan surrenders. To clear the underground maze, you can kill all the monsters or subdue them as maze guards." Charlotte has obtained the power of the Maze of Agmirus and has 9 maze runes. She can transform the maze guards without the help of the maze. If she can really subdue a group of maze guards, it will be much better than killing them. The sharp female voice was extremely angry, shouting, "You actually made our entire clan surrender? You are such a bold guy." Charlotte responded, "Then kill your entire clan. Anyway, for me, the 2 choices are almost the same." The voice of the leader spider monster kept echoing, cursing Charlotte with the most despicable words and casting countless curses on him, but Charlotte could tell that the leader of this giant spider monster could only curse verbally and did not have the ability to curse, so he didn't care much. He suddenly found that there was a slight glow on the body of the spider monster as big as a house that he had just killed. He jumped out of his hiding place, walked over and collected more than 10 divine fragments, and found a long sword that looked like an ancient one in the body of this spider monster. This long sword is a bit like the famous sword on Teobeo in later generations. It is very beautiful, with a narrow and long shape and elegant arc, but it is not seen in any documents, and it is also completely different from the swords used in actual combat in the history of various countries. It is the kind of product that makes buyers and sellers happy, but only ancient weapon enthusiasts are unhappy. Charlotte tried to wield a knife flower, but it was not very smooth, and it was not like a real combat weapon. Just as he was about to put it away, he felt a long knife in his hand vibrate slightly, and flew up to his head, slashing fiercely at his forehead. Charlotte retreated at a very fast speed, and the 18 flaming hands accelerated one after another, hitting the long knife. Although 3 flaming hands were chopped and exploded, they pushed the long knife open a little, allowing Charlotte to dodge it narrowly. Charlotte then accelerated, stretched out her hand to hold the long knife, and the bloody glory turned into star fighting spirit. The colorless blade, the fierce erosion, and the dark erosion were activated together. The long knife made a crisp sound and was shattered by him, and the imprint of the mind inside was also destroyed by him. Charlotte was extremely angry. It would have been fine if he had lost 3 flaming hands, but just now he was really just a hair away from being split in half. The giant spider leader acted like a fool, which indeed distracted Charlotte's vigilance. It sent its subordinates out not for reconnaissance, but to plot against Charlotte in a way that would kill them. Charlotte almost fell for it. A giggle echoed in every corner. The giant spider leader's voice turned extremely gentle. Kill my entire clan? Are you sure? Charlotte quickly calmed down. It was meaningless to lose his temper at this moment. He said in a deep voice, that's right, although you plotted against me once, you didn't succeed. Next time, you won't have a chance. Dozens of human-shaped cocoons tightly bound by spider silk flew out from the depths of the nest and landed on the ground, still squirming. It was obvious that there were humans inside, and they were living humans. Charlotte flew out a flaming hand, selected a human-shaped cocoon and tapped it lightly. The whole cocoon burst open, and countless small spiders crawled out. Fortunately, Charlotte did not go forward in person, otherwise, if so many small spiders pounced on one of them, it would be extremely dangerous. They are 100% poisonous. The giant spider monster leader's laughter changed constantly, and finally turned into a piercing tone, saying, I have a lot of tricks. You missed once, missed twice, can you miss every time? Charlotte was really a bit headache. He didn't waste any words and fired a shot at the ground. The blazing bullet burned to death more than a dozen human-shaped cocoons and the small spiders that had just exploded. These small spiders were too weak to be considered monsters at all, otherwise there would be millions of monsters in the nest of this spider monster alone. However, when all these human-shaped cocoons were burned, only 4 of them turned into ashes, and the rest still showed human shapes. Charlotte's forehead was hot, and after a burning flame flew out, it gently flicked away the ashes on the surface of these human-shaped cocoons. There were indeed real humans inside. I don't know where they came from, the evil god pre-selected, or the evil god candidate. They were still struggling just now, but now they're dead. Charlotte took back the flaming hand, no longer reluctant to leave, turned around and left, and changed to another monster nest. Of course, he would not let this giant spider monster go. Charlotte prepared to accumulate a batch of 18-level blood energy bullets, and directly smash this monster nest in the most violent way. Charlotte wandered around the last 8 monster nests. Although he killed hundreds of monsters, he could not break through any nest. He did replenish the 3 flaming hands he lost. Charlotte knew that his underground city journey had reached the final stage of the assault. As long as he could deal with the last 8 monster nests, he could maze this place and break through the 4th maze. This exploration gave Charlotte a bottom line in his heart. Although he often fights alone, he is not only good at fighting alone, he also has a variety of combat abilities. Charlotte chose the giant spider monster's lair again. This time, she did not try to fight, but activated the maze rune and released a fog. Endless fog drifted and infiltrated into the monster's lair. The maze power is different from the power Charlotte uses daily. It takes a very long time to activate, so he rarely uses it. But if he fails to attack first, he will naturally change his way. At the beginning, the fog released by Charlotte will be blown away by the spider monsters with their power, but the fog is endless and inexhaustible. After 7 or 8 days, the entire giant spider monster's lair has been completely shrouded in fog. Although a few extraordinary giant spider monsters will activate their power to disperse some of the fog, they will soon be covered by fog again. The giant spider leader was calm at first, but soon became panicked. After all, it was an 18th level monster with extraordinary wisdom and cunning, even better than humans. Of course, it knew that Charlotte would come back with some powerful means. It even deliberately showed up several times to lure Charlotte into the nest to chase, but Charlotte remained unmoved. After another 2 or 3 days, Charlotte could sense that the fog had penetrated every corner of the giant spider's nest. He activated another maze ability, the false maze. This spider's nest was turned into a temporary maze. Charlotte looked at the giant spider monster's lair, which made a chirping sound, and the ever-changing voice of the spider monster leader. She took out her diary, turned to the side of the Agneris labyrinth, and said lightly, "This is the first time I used this power. You should feel honored." The giant spider monster leader screamed, "Whatever you can do, just use it." "I am really not afraid." Charlotte smiled slightly and said, "Sometimes, even I am afraid of myself." When Charlotte chose Bloody Glory, this secret method created by the great philosopher of the human race, Protagoras, was not so complicated. There were only 13 bloody whirlpools, which could only condense the 13 strange skills of Bloody Glory. But he successively learned from several blood clans the secret method that the great philosopher of the human race had never touched, and even opened up 2 bloody whirlpools that were not originally in Bloody Glory, making this secret method completely unrecognizable. Sometimes, Charlotte did not want to use certain powers. He always felt that these powers were too incredible and too easy to get out of control, but now he was ready to use them. These abilities, even Charlotte, the manipulator, would feel a little scared. Charlotte wrote a simple story on the blank page of the Agneris labyrinth. A spider queen from a foreign land fell in love with a human man. In the end, the two of them lived together forever in their underground nest. The story was not original. The core of the story was so old-fashioned that it spanned time and space, catching up with hundreds of years ago. Well, the main theme was a cliché. Then he launched it brazenly: capture. The mist shrouding the giant spider monster's nest gave birth to an extremely strange power, sticking to all objects, wrapping the stones, mud, spider silk, spider webs, cocoons, small spiders, big spiders, ordinary monsters, extraordinary monsters, and even the leader in the nest, desperately pulling towards the void. The giant spider monster leader did not expect Charlotte to have such a domineering and unreasonable ability. It didn't know how to resist it at all. It could only struggle hard and use every kind of power to resist this pull. But it was as high as the 18th level and could still resist the pulling force, but its descendants had no way to resist this strange power. Soon, the weakest little spiders disappeared in the mist. The giant spider monster leader watched his nest, his descendants, and himself being absorbed by a mysterious force. He faintly sensed that there was a strong bond that locked him firmly. His struggle became more and more powerless, and finally fell into a page of the book. Well, Charlotte's diary. Charlotte looked at the beautiful spider queen in the diary. It was the first time he saw the leader of this giant spider monster. Its upper body was a mature queen, and its lower body was a giant spider that was 7 or 8 meters tall. Its 8 long legs were like steel and sharp. If he fought alone, he would still need to waste some time. If the other party brought a bunch of descendants, he might have to run away, but now. Charlotte smiled gently and said, "Tell me your name, my dear little spider." Chapter 495 Breakthrough. The Fourth Maze. Get lost. Charlotte smiled slightly at the giant spider monster leader who was extremely angry. Anyway, he didn't really want to know the other party's name, so he closed the diary. He let out a long sigh and then went to the other 7 monster nests. Charlotte had too many methods, but he didn't know whether it was due to personal habit or some kind of persistence. He preferred to fight in a traditional way, but since the traditional method couldn't deal with these monsters, it was okay to use slightly more extreme methods. This time, Charlotte took a long time, but the process was boring. He used the maze ability to seal the other 7 monster nests in the diary. Although his diary was full of monsters, which sounded very exciting, Charlotte was not very happy, because he suddenly felt that he was about to become an evil god. Charlotte still wanted to be a normal person. He now had a strange obsession with being able to live an ordinary and happy life with Annie. Charlotte didn't understand why this thing seemed easy to do. After he and Annie got together, he had never been able to do it. First, he kept fighting and left Strasbourg. Then, His Majesty of Brittany rebelled and wanted to divide up the Black Phoenix. Every time, he had to stay away from Anne, the girl he loved the most. But every time, he had to do it. He had to work hard to accumulate merits and reputation in order to marry Anne. His father-in-law fought against the Black Phoenix and promised him the territory of the Black Phoenix. How could he not go? This time, he faced the coming of the evil god, and he had no reason to refuse. After collecting the last monster nest, Charlotte couldn't help but sigh and muttered to himself, "When can I live with Anne in peace, doing nothing every day, reading novels, writing novels, occasionally writing thank you letters to readers, and opening gifts from readers, such as monthly tickets. What a happy thing that would be. I have begun to hate fighting. I believe that after this time, I will no longer need to fight. I can go back to Strasbourg and ask His Majesty the Emperor to marry Princess Anne to me, and then we can go back to the Duchy of Mecklen, or to Anne's territory, and live a peaceful life." Charlotte stretched out his hand and pressed the ground. This time he did not encounter any obstacles and easily turned this underground city into a maze. After turning this ruin into a maze, Charlotte also got a ray of thought: should we continue to use this place as the 4th branch venue of the Evil God Arena? Charlotte hesitated and agreed. Although Zimmerman's transformation into a girl was a bit scary, he still wanted to know what would happen next. As for the fact that there were no monsters in the underground labyrinth, that was not a big deal. Perhaps the evil gods who had jointly created this branch of the arena would invest a group of subordinates? Even if the evil gods did not increase their investment, his diary still sealed 8 monster nests, although these monsters were a bit too strong. However, there were still a large number of crew members on his ghost ship, so they could also hold out, right? After mastering this labyrinth, Charlotte left the underground city easily. His subordinates had already set up a camp on this deserted island. Charlotte had not returned for more than a month, and people should have been panicking. However, because Charlotte left the Holy Light Kingdom on the sea before leaving, most members of the fleet, especially senior officers, were on the Holy Light Kingdom every day, working tirelessly as teachers, that is, teachers in that sense. Almost no one was worried about Charlotte, and everyone lived a very happy life. Even the chief of the Blue Sky tribe was captured by Vigo somehow, but after the capture, he was a little sad every day, and no one knew what he was worried about. When Charlotte returned to the ground, he saw a peaceful scene. He was very angry. He first announced that he would continue sailing and a new route had appeared, and then he drove most people off the Holy Light Kingdom. When the fleet bypassed a deserted island, Charlotte was slightly moved. After all, this was the most difficult of the 4 mazes he passed through, and he almost broke through it with his own strength, with almost no help from his subordinates. Charlotte now has a little interest in Agmaris. This maze evil god looks like a monster, but he can make such a big scene, so he is definitely not an ordinary evil god, and his mind must be full of evil wisdom. Charlotte is also full of worries about future challenges. He doesn't know what the 5th maze will look like. What dangers will there be? After bypassing the deserted island, this huge fleet sailed along the route for less than 2 days, and Charlotte found that they appeared on the Christoph route again. This time their target is an island on the Christoph route, Aegean Island. This island is a very famous supply point on the Christoph route. There are 6 small towns and a port on the island. The population is close to 100,000. It is a very prosperous human gathering point in the Aegean Sea. Charlotte never knew that Agmaris could stretch his hand so long. He could actually turn a town on the Aegean island into a maze. According to the diary, the town that was turned into a maze by Agmaris is called Tony Dake Town. It is the town with the least population on the Aegean island, with only about 5 or 6,000 residents. According to the records, the people of Tony Stark Town all believe in the Lantern Man, and they believe in the extremely mysterious Kabbalah school. Although their population is small, because all of them believe in the Kabbalah school, there are several masters of classical alchemy. The weapons, equipment, and extraordinary objects produced are famous even in the New and Old worlds, and are unique in the Agar Sea. Charlotte could never imagine that a town that believes in the righteous gods could be stolen by the evil gods. He couldn't figure it out, so he prepared to conduct a field investigation. Charlotte's fleet was too large. Not to mention the 3 legendary warships, 7 magic alchemy warships, and 11 classical magic ghost warships. The 500 or 600 ghost ships alone were enough to scare any resident on the Aegean island to death in broad daylight. The appearance of this fleet was like a natural disaster to the residents of the entire Aegean island. No one knew the origin of this fleet, but almost everyone felt that when this fleet docked, everyone on the island would be destroyed, and no one would be alive. All the ships on the island frantically left the port. Those who didn't have time to leave either stood up, took up arms, and prepared to resist, or hid in secret places on the island to escape, or pray desperately to the gods, hoping that they would grant them divine grace and drive away this terrifying fleet. Chapter 496, Charlotte has to use a fake identity. Charlotte had never expected that his fleet would bring such a great disturbance to the Aegean island. He looked at the ships rushing out of the port in a frenzy, and was quite speechless. This was not his fault. When Charlotte was in Fars, he had always had an official status. Now he was even the Duke of Mechlin. As long as the flag of the Mechlin family was hung, everyone would know that he was the new noble of the empire. Charlotte was so famous now that he could be called a well-known person in the old world. Charlotte casually selected a saint of the dead. Almost all of the 11 ancient magic ghost warships he had subdued were commanded by saints of the dead. These saints of the dead naturally became part of the fleet. Charlotte usually treats her subordinates with respect and never shows any arrogance to the holy orders, whether it is the Black Dragon who surrendered voluntarily, Agon, the former 3 giants of the Royal Knights who surrendered by agreement, Vigo who surrendered by force, the Golden Goats Rolf and Chudello who surrendered by contract, or the good eldest sons Gareth and Andreas who surrendered inexplicably. She never uses these holy orders to do trivial things on a daily basis. With these undead holy orders, Charlotte can use them at will, because they are not human after all. A holy dead order rose into the sky under the sun and flew to the port of Aegean Island. It said in a hoarse and frightening voice, "The Fars Empire, the newly promoted Grand Duke Mekran is passing by here to replenish supplies. He is not coming to occupy Aegean Island, and there will be no war. Please don't worry, with the strength of Duke Mekran's fleet, there is no need to tell any lies." The sun shone directly behind the holy dead order, and its figure was shining like the god of death coming to lead the living to the pure land. Although everyone heard its words and understood these people, and knew that such a powerful fleet had no need to lie, everyone was still panicked and no one could calm down. Seeing this, Charlotte had no choice but to summon the holy dead order back and let all the ghost ships sink into the sea first. First, the ghost ships would be uncomfortable under the sun, and second, it would make the fleet look less fierce. Although 500 or 600 ghost ships sank to the bottom of the sea, Charlotte's fleet was left with only 3 legendary warships and 7 magic alchemy warships, which seemed a little lonely, but it still couldn't erase the panic in the hearts of the residents of Aegean Island, and the situation did not improve at all. Charlotte could only sigh and said, "Wait a few days. After a few days, they should regain some rationality." The saints under Charlotte gathered on the Holy Light Kingdom. He didn't even need to call people to come for a meeting. These people were willing to stay on this legendary warship and didn't want to go back to their own achievements. Even those gentlemen, such as Kratos, liked to spend time on the Holy Light Kingdom. Charlotte was an earthling after all. He had only owned a Dalmabatus for a short time before he changed his flagship. So he had not had time to do anything on the Dalmabatus. But on the Holy Light Kingdom, he had set up various entertainment facilities that were only available on Earth, such as maid cafes, bars with female singers and dancers, and snake card clubs. Each snake card club had a 2-dimensional beautiful girl transformed by the Great Lingmo serving as a waiter, completely turning the Holy Light Kingdom into a den of money and an entertainment venue. The entertainment facilities were so complete, and there was also plenty of coffee, fine wine, and delicious food. The 2-dimensional beautiful girls and 2-dimensional handsome guys who shuttled back and forth on the ship added countless fun to this legendary battleship, making the officers of the Mecklen fleet love to spend time here. Charlotte said that she would stay for a while, and her high-ranking officers dispersed and had fun as they pleased. The officers in charge of military supplies on the ship lowered dozens of small boats, approached the Aegean Island, and went ashore to purchase supplies. Although the supplies Charlotte brought were sufficient, they were delayed too many times and for too long, so they still needed a large amount of replenishment. Charlotte called Andreas and Agon, and the 3 of them also took a small boat. He wanted to go ashore to check what was going on in Tony Stark Town. The elephant man Agon didn't care, but the eldest brother Andreas didn't want to. He kept muttering along the way, "How good is it to be on the Holy Light Kingdom? What's the point of such a broken island?" Charlotte couldn't help asking, "You are getting married soon, right?" Andreas said with a little pride, "My father went to Baron, and I am now a Fars noble. No one can control me anymore. Whether I get married or not, even the old man can't control it, and no one needs to urge me." Charlotte thought about it carefully, and it was really the truth. Constantine took refuge with Baron and is now a Baron noble. Andreas took refuge with him and is now a Fars noble. How can a Baron noble scold and control a Fars noble? As Andreas's master, Charlotte couldn't allow such a thing. Well, he still had to take the blame for Andreas. Andreas rubbed his hands and said, "Charlotte, you don't like this tune, but you have to know that the girls transformed by the Great Lingmo according to your illustrations are really beautiful, and they are very good at learning." "Yeah, let's not talk about learning first. In short, I think even if you return to Fars, you should dock the Holy Light God Kingdom at the port and let everyone come up and play." Charlotte was silent for a while and said, "I will make a system later to only allow people from the Knights of Favonius to board the Holy Light God Kingdom, and have different powers according to their positions, since there is no way to contain it." Charlotte also thought about it. It's not bad to give the Knights of Favonius an extra cohesive factor. Andreas looked back frequently, and it was obvious that he was still reluctant to leave the Great Lingmo on the Holy Light God Kingdom, but when he arrived at the Aegean Island, he stepped onto the shore, and his whole momentum changed, and he regained the momentum of the youngest saint in the former Black Phoenix dynasty. At this time, there were 2 groups of people on the shore facing each other. One group was Charlotte's men, and the other group was the most courageous people on the island. They wanted to fight to the death to protect their homes. Charlotte's men did not want to take action, but the people on the islands were aggressive. Behind them were their families, their hometowns, their wives, children, parents and friends. They were all willing to risk their lives. No one was willing to back down. Charlotte could understand these people's emotions and admired these courageous people very much. He took Andreas and Agon and walked between the two groups and said loudly, "Please let one of you leaders come out to talk to me." A very graceful man with a long sword on his waist walked to the front and said, "I am not a leader, but if you have anything to say, you can tell me." Charlotte made an imperial salute and said, "I am the Duke of Mecklenburg. May I ask your identity, sir?" The man's eyes did not change, but he said lightly, "I am familiar with the nobles of Fars, but I have never heard of the surname Mecklin, let alone a big man like the Duke." Charlotte was a little embarrassed and could only say, "Sorry, that's my nickname. My real identity is the 5th level clerk of the Empire and the Fars Empire's special envoy to the New World War Commissioner." Charlotte had no other choice. It was very difficult to explain the rebellions of Erdmire in Brittany. She also had to explain how he was a key figure in the rebellion of the old Earl of Brittany, how he was the first to support the new emperor's ascension to the throne, and how he was the emperor's son-in-law. Forget it, it would be better to just make up a fake identity. Sure enough, this new identity made the other party believe it easily. The Mecklin fleet was so magnificent, and Charlotte seemed to have a very high status. The identity of the 5th level clerk was indeed a contrast, and the identity of a diplomatic envoy with special missions and full powers was also in line with the behavior of this fleet. The man with a long sword hanging from his waist said, "My name is Temple Robin. I am the captain of the militia on the island." Charlotte nodded slightly. The Argosy did not belong to any country, so the political system of the major empires was not reflected here. Although there was a city lord on the Golden Island, his power was not great, and he was easily caught and killed by the residents. There were 6 towns in a port on the Love Island, and it was obvious that there was no unified management agency. The militia captain was considered a senior person on the island. Charlotte smiled faintly and said, "I want to get some supplies in a fair trade." Temple Robin took a deep breath and said, "On behalf of the residents of Love Island, I am willing to provide water and some supplies, but please leave immediately after replenishing." Charlotte smiled and said, "As long as I want, we can attack Love Island this evening. It's just that we are not here for war, we are just passing by, so we are willing to get along with the residents on the island in a friendly manner, but you are so aggressive, it's a challenge. Please believe us, with those 3 legendary battleships, there is no need to play any tricks or any strategies with you. Can we have a peaceful and equal dialogue?" Temple Robin took a deep breath and said, "But you are too powerful, and the sense of oppression you bring to us is really too strong. Everyone can't bear the pressure." Charlotte smiled slightly and said, "As long as everyone gets used to it, as long as a few days pass, everyone will see that we are not a threat and have no intention of war, and they won't be so worried and afraid." By the way, Temple, are you from Fars? What's your relationship with Duke Robin? Temple Robin's expression was slightly gloomy, and he said, "I am ashamed of this surname. I don't want to talk about the past." Charlotte nodded and said, "My quartermasters hope to start purchasing. Most of them don't carry offensive weapons. Only some guards carry swords and guns. Can you let the militia go? In exchange, I allow your people to be with each purchasing team." Temple Robin talked with Charlotte for a long time and really believed that Charlotte had no intention of attacking Love Island. After going back to discuss with the militia for a while, he agreed to Charlotte's proposal. Charlotte smiled slightly and said, "I want to walk around the Aegean island. I wonder if Temple can be a guide." Temple Robin took a deep breath and said, "I have no problem. I will be responsible for your safety on the island." Charlotte smiled. Chapter 497 Tony Stark Town completes maze. As the quartermaster of the Mecklin fleet made a batch of purchases on the island, the residents of the Aegean island finally calmed down. After all, people who spend money to buy things are not that scary. What is scary is people who don't spend money to buy things. Well, those who don't spend money and don't want to buy things are even more scary. Charlotte took Andreas and Agon and walked around the port for a while. The natural terrain of this port is quite good, and it can even dock giant warships like the Dalmabas. However, after all, there are not many ships traveling between the new and old worlds, so its scale is not large. Only part of the terrain is used to build a dock, and at most 10 ships can be docked at the same time. The port is not prosperous, and there are not even many fishing boats. It is not as good as the ports of Fars and Ingrima, and even Cappadocia. After walking around for a while, Charlotte suggested going to several other small towns. Temple Robin chatted with Charlotte and Andreas for a while and had a good impression of them. Charlotte's words and deeds were somewhat mysterious. Andreas was a young man from an old noble family with an excellent temperament. Although Argon hardly spoke, he seemed to be quite shrewd and profound. Temple Robin was now completely convinced that they were not here to capture the Aegean island. He thought of the ghost ships and was still a little curious. He asked, "There is something I am curious about, but I don't know if I should ask. How come there are so many ghost ships in your fleet? Although the legendary warships are powerful, they are far less terrifying than hundreds of ghost ships." Charlotte smiled slightly and said, "There was no such thing in my fleet. Not long ago, we encountered a ghost fleet and fought a battle with them. These ghost ships are my trophies." Temple Robin was horrified. He hesitated for a while. Between being able to operate hundreds of ghost ships and defeating the ghost fleet, he chose the latter. Both were hard to believe, but the latter would make the living feel more comfortable. He also didn't want to hide a thing like an undead monarch in the fleet outside the Aegean island. In the eyes of ordinary people, that thing is no different from an evil god. Temple Robin wiped the sweat from his forehead and said, "Your fleet is so powerful." Charlotte smiled and replied, "I think so too," although Temple Robin was curious again and wanted to know what Charlotte and the others were going to do. After all, such a powerful fleet is enough to destroy a medium-sized country, but in the end he was tactful and did not ask. The former curiosity was a matter of life and death, and the latter curiosity was pure curiosity. He did not want to anger Charlotte, even though this level 5 clerk looked harmless. Temple Robin took the three to Tony Stark Town. When Charlotte stepped into this town, she knew that someone must have made it a labyrinth. Most people cannot notice the labyrinth. Baron Leo did not notice that there was something wrong with Machupi at the time, but when it comes to high-level or holy-level labyrinth cities, the spirituality of these people cannot be concealed. Charlotte is not only a high-level, but also has several times more spiritual power than ordinary high-level people, thanks to several times of facing evil gods and righteous gods. Moreover, she is a person who has mastered the power of the maze. Tony Stark's maze-making method is very rough, and of course it can't be hidden from him. Charlotte can even perceive that this maze town is not as good as the first time he made Machupi into a maze. He even suspects that the master of this town probably only has the trick of making people lost. Well, this maze town is leaking everywhere in his eyes. Charlotte even tried to infiltrate the power of the maze into this town, but she encountered almost no obstacles, just like a girl who rejects her lover, and the resistance is not very strong. The people in this town are calmer than those in other towns. Although some of them are hiding, there are already people walking on the streets. When they see Charlotte and others from a distance, they will still be curious. Charlotte smiled warmly and even greeted the townspeople. He said to Temple Robin, "I'm sorry for causing such panic on the island. How about I send someone over tonight to hold a party? We'll take care of the drinks and food, and let the islanders participate to relieve the tension. What do you think?" Temple Robin hesitated for a moment, but agreed. Charlotte went around Tony Stark Town and found an excuse not to go to the other 5 towns. She took Andreas and Agon away from the port and returned to the Holy Light Kingdom. Charlotte said to Andreas, "Tonight, you take 200 big demons to hold a large dance party with the residents of Aegean Island." Andreas couldn't help but say, "Is it necessary to care about the residents of these islands? Most of them are ordinary people and can't help us at all." Charlotte smiled and said, "I know they are ordinary people, so I just want to appease them because they are panicking because of us. Besides, the previous mazes are too difficult. I always feel that the 5th maze is not that simple. I'm already trying to maze Tony Stark Town, and I believe there will be a response soon. I'm looking forward to the changes in this town." Charlotte was embarrassed when she left the port. Agon had been silent all the time, but now he was a little curious and asked, "What's wrong with you?" Charlotte said embarrassedly, "The maze was just completed." Charlotte climbed up the highest shipbuilding and looked at the Aegean island, puzzled. The first 4 mazes were more difficult than the last. In the 3rd maze, he encountered the Ishmaran Palace and thousands of ghost ships. The 4th maze trapped him for more than a month. Charlotte thought that there must be some hidden danger in the 5th maze, but he didn't expect that he had just secretly tried it to test the further changes of this maze. But the feedback he received was that Tony Stark Town had completed the maze. How could this be possible? Andreas went up to the deck with him and asked, "Will the party still be held tonight?" Charlotte hesitated for a moment and said, "Let's go ahead. I always feel that this maze is not that simple. Maybe when I relax my vigilance, There will be strange changes. At night, hundreds of crew members and the Great Limo landed on the Aegean island and held a bonfire party with the islanders. Originally, the islanders were quite wary of this, but when they saw the Great Limo, whose beauty was not like that of a human, they had no scruples at all, and almost all the young men on the island swarmed out. Chapter 498, Circular Maze, Aegean Island. The ancient Medoro tree stood upright on the bow of the Holy Light God Kingdom, rooted in the magic circle. Charlotte has always wanted to know what this magic circle is all about. But every time he approached, the whisper of destiny would issue a warning, so he never explored it. Later, after the ancient tree took root, when he approached again, the whisper of destiny did not react, but Charlotte was even more afraid to go down, because he already knew that under the roots of the ancient Medoro tree, there were only hundreds of Lingmo and Dalingmo. The Holy Light God Kingdom is not the same as when the Blue Sky tribe defected. There are more than 1,000 Dalingmo on the Holy Light God Kingdom now, and more than 70% of the Dalingmo are female. They transform into various two-dimensional beautiful girls, and recently there are even a group of internet celebrity dancers. They are the kind of short-legged creatures with explosively good figures on the screen, but small in reality. Well, Charlotte has always had a fast hand clerk around him, and the illustrator joined later. He is indeed a little tired of the two-dimensional world, and wants to do something more tempting. This group of big Lingmo landed on the Aegean island, and it was simply a killer weapon that swept everything. No male creature could resist this level of beauty. The residents of the Aegean island were originally quite wary of the Mecklen fleet, but this night, Charlotte no longer saw such fearful eyes. The big Lingmas, talking and laughing, completed the diplomatic task very well. The Aegean island, which was reveling all night and brightly lit, had a decadent beauty. Early the next morning, Charlotte looked at the new route that appeared in the distance and was extremely speechless. He still couldn't believe that the fifth maze was broken through like this. Charlotte thought for a long time, and ran to discuss with Temple Robin, saying that he was a believer in the Serpent of Fate and wanted to build several temples of the Serpent of Fate on the island. Temple Robin hesitated for a moment and agreed to help him persuade the residents of the island, but he was not sure because there had never been a temple on the island. The reason why there is no temple of the 9 gods on the Aegean island is that it costs a lot to build a temple. The island does not have the financial and material resources, and no one has such a high prestige to gather the strength of the people. When Charlotte, with the help of Temple Robin, began to persuade the residents of the island, to Temple Robin's surprise, almost every resident readily agreed. Everyone said, the Serpent of Fate is one of the 9 gods, and there is nothing wrong with building his temple. After obtaining the consent of the residents of the Aegean island, Charlotte summoned a group of maze guards, purchased construction materials on the island, and began to build a temple. It may be that the aftermath of the party was too great. Not only did the residents of the island not have a single opponent, but there were even countless young people who took the initiative to come and help. After helping with the work for a while, these people would run to the port to look around and ask the maze guards if those beautiful young ladies wanted to go ashore to play. Some people also asked, whether they wanted to or not, how to get on the Holy Light God Kingdom. Although there were various episodes, the construction of the Temple of the Serpent of Fate went quite smoothly. Charlotte built the Temple of the Serpent of Fate in the port and 6 towns, and specially built a lighthouse in the town of Tony Stark. This small move made the residents of Tony Stark town like him very much. They only had a few thousand people and could not complete the construction of a temple. Someone helped to build a lighthouse, which was the biggest gesture of goodwill to these people of the Kabbalah school. After more than 10 days of delay, several temples were built. When Charlotte was ready to leave the Aegean island, he specifically asked Temple Robin for help. On the day he landed on the island, the warriors who bravely made a gesture of resistance were all courageous and the best talents. Charlotte hoped to recruit a group of crew members from these people. Temple Robin was still a little hesitant, but when Charlotte was willing to pay enough gold ecu, he was also convinced. Temple Robin thought that it would be difficult to persuade these people to leave their homes, but he did not expect that these people would be very enthusiastic when they heard that they could join Charlotte's fleet, and almost no one was willing to refuse. There were even many young people who wanted to join, even though they were not on the invitation list. But all of them were rejected by Charlotte, who was only interested in the warriors who fought bravely that day. After several days of selection, hundreds of residents on the island joined the fleet. Charlotte repeatedly confirmed that the 5th maze had indeed been broken through, so she let the new crew members say goodbye to their families and friends, and led the fleet to leave the Aegean island. When the fleet left the Love Island hundreds of kilometers away, ghost ships emerged from the seabed one after another. Some of them started from the mast and emerged from the sea little by little, repelling a large amount of seawater from the deck. Some simply turned over. They were originally sailing in the opposite direction under the sea level, and some were shrouded in mist, like ghosts and gods appearing. The ghost crew members on the ship also walked out of the cabin one by one, roaring to the sky. When 11 ancient magic ghost warships appeared one after another, the momentum of this ghost fleet reached its peak. Hundreds of ghost ships went out to sea one after another, with such a huge momentum that it was like a fleet from hell, breaking through the barriers of the world and preparing to expedition to the human world. Temple Robin's face turned slightly pale. Well, he did not resist the temptation and joined Charlotte's fleet. Of course, his reason for joining was very high-sounding. He said that his main purpose was to protect the young people on the Aegean island. After all, joining such a strange fleet, no one knows if there will be any danger. Temple Robin wanted to escort the young people who joined Charlotte's fleet. If he had not been holding a beautiful girl who had transformed into a big demon when he said this to Charlotte, I believe it would be very convincing. Temple Robin even floated in the air, several inches off the ground, directly revealing his hidden strength. He was also a saint. Charlotte raised her arm, patted his shoulder, and said, "There is really no need to be afraid. We are all decent humans, not undead." Just at this moment, a several-meter-long fish passed by the Holy Light Kingdom. The side of the ship of this legendary warship suddenly opened its huge strange mouth and swallowed a big fish. No one on the ship took it seriously. This kind of situation was commonplace. The Holy Light Kingdom had always been so evil. But Temple Robin saw it for the first time. He suddenly broke out in a cold sweat, feeling as if he had strayed into the lair of the evil god and brought the young people of the Aegean island to a dangerous place. Charlotte had no time to comfort this branch of the Robin family. He had learned some sailing skills and was no longer a novice. He commanded this huge fleet and sailed along the newly emerged route for 6 or 7 days. His eyes tightened slightly because the Aegean island appeared again in front of him. Chapter 499. No one's fate is set in stone, everyone has the opportunity to change the future. The residents of this brand new Aegean island reacted the same as before. People kept jumping on the boats and fleeing far away, while others organized themselves to resist, but more residents hid themselves, making the entire port very deserted. Temple Robin looked at the Aegean island that appeared in the distance, his hands were cold, and he shouted, "That's not the Aegean island. That's definitely not the Aegean island." He took off desperately and flew towards the Aegean island. Charlotte snapped her fingers and said, "Andreas, follow up and take a look." Andreas also took off. After a while, he flew back first and whispered, "The people on the island are different from what we saw. There are no temples of the 9 gods on the island." Charlotte nodded to show that she understood, and he fell into deep thought. Well, the thoughts transmitted from the diary indicate that this is the 6th maze. If it is still the 5th maze, Charlotte will definitely be very terrified, because it means that he is trapped in a loop. Whether it is a time loop or a pure space loop, in short, it will be very troublesome. But this is the 6th maze, which means that Agneris is not yet strong enough to loop time and space. Charlotte thought to herself, is he trying to scare me back by forging a time and space loop? Temple Robin also came back soon. He said in a lost heart, "There are no people of ours on the island. No one I know. I am very worried about my friends on the island. Are they all gone and replaced by these new people?" Charlotte comforted him, "If the evil god is so powerful, there is no need to play such tricks. Just trap my fleet on the sea." He was also puzzled, but he did not panic at all. He omitted the step of asking the quartermaster to purchase. According to the last arrangement, he directly sent hundreds of great demons, led by Andreas, to land on this new Aegean island for diplomatic activities. This Aegean island is almost the same as the first one in terms of natural geography, but the residents on the island are completely different, and there is no Tony Stark town. 10 days later, the Temple of the Serpent of Fate rose from the ground on this island, and a new route appeared again. Charlotte recruited a new crew and set off to continue his journey. A few days later, the 3rd Aegean island appeared in front of him again. This time, even the crew on his ship were terrified. Charlotte sensed the thoughts from the diary, telling him that this was the 7th maze, so he did it for the 3rd time without hesitation, doing what he had done twice before. When the 4th Aegean island appeared, the golden goat Rolf ran to Charlotte and said worriedly, According to the speed we are sailing, we should have left the Agar Sea by now, but we still can't see the hope of leaving the sea area." Charlotte nodded to indicate that she knew, and still did the same thing for the fourth time as she had done it 3 times before. The atmosphere of this fleet became more and more weird, but Charlotte showed her iron-like will and kept moving forward. No matter how weird the atmosphere on the fleet was, every time a new Aegean island appeared, she still followed the procedure and performed the same operation as before. Until they passed the 27th Aegean island, which was the 31st maze. The sea ahead was suddenly very wide. Charlotte's fleet actually sailed out of the Agar Sea. There were cheers from Charlotte's fleet. And countless people cheered. The atmosphere along the way was so depressing that everyone was about to be unable to bear it. Every time they saw a new Aegean island, everyone would feel a little desperate. Although everyone knows that there is no danger in the Aegean island, doing the same thing day after day, year after year, and never changing is a kind of imprisonment for most people. Even the most ordinary people will think that there is always a little change in their lives. Every day is always a little different. For example, yesterday I ate a box lunch for 8 yuan, and today I ate a big bowl of noodles for 12 yuan. This subtle change may not be realized by many people, but it can also provide the courage to live. If a street sells the same food, you will never be able to buy the second kind of food. I believe that no matter how easy life is and how good the living environment is, it will still be unbearable. Charlotte looked at the sea of islands behind her, and then looked at the boundless sea in front of her. He suddenly found Juno and said, "Teacher, I want to return to the Sea of Grass alone." Juno was very surprised and said, "Why do you want to go back?" Charlotte said lightly, "I have seen through Agmirus's weakness." Juno smiled slightly and said, "Indeed, he showed his weakness when he took away the Ishmaran palace. This time he actually used such means to oppress you and make you retreat. Although it is a very clever means, it can still be said that he is indeed weak and can't trap you head-on. But have you thought it through? You have such a powerful fleet, but you still want to challenge Agmirus alone?" Charlotte nodded and said, "I have thought it through. I want to challenge Agmirus alone, although I don't know what happened to Agmirus. But I have a hunch that this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity." Juno said, "What if you estimate wrong?" Charlotte couldn't help laughing and said, "I prayed to the serpent of fate not long ago, but he did not respond to me. Instead, he whipped me with his snake tail. I didn't understand the oracle of this righteous God at that time, but now I understand. Destiny is like water, it flows endlessly, no one's destiny is immutable, and everyone has the opportunity to change their future. If I don't have the courage to challenge destiny, how can I be a believer of the God of destiny? Teacher, please take the fleet back and go back to Black Phoenix City first." Juno smiled and said, "I understand, go and challenge the unknown destiny." Charlotte transferred all the humans on the Holy Light Kingdom to the Dalmabas. He only left the maze guards, a group of blood servants who had not yet been successfully trained, and the Great Lingmo on this legendary warship. When Charlotte crossed the Agar Sea and appeared in the Vest Sea, an idea came to his mind. He knew that this idea was a bit crazy, and he also knew that this was a gamble, but he still bet everything without hesitation. Charlotte believed, under the watchful eyes of the Serpent of Destiny, no matter how big the gamble is, it is actually cheating. Chapter 500, Death Battle. Charlotte separated from the fleet. The fleet chose the Ferdinand route, but he still chose the Christopher route. If it were an ordinary warship, there would be no way to operate it alone, but the Holy Light Kingdom was different. It didn't even need anyone to operate it. Of course, although the Holy Light Kingdom didn't have humans, it still had maze guards, blood servants, big demons and other evil spirits. They could also serve as crew members, but they were not as useful as experienced sailors. The Georgiadi Hadrian fleet, which had been accompanying Charlotte's fleet, had already assembled outside the Argonautic Sea. They also passed through the Argonautic Sea safely, and even a few ships were left behind. Georgiadi Hadrian looked at the Argonautic Sea and breathed a sigh of relief. He was very worried about encountering Charlotte Mecklen's fleet again. He didn't know how the other party could get so many ghost ships. Although he was still confident that his fleet had the upper hand, he definitely didn't want to bear the losses of going to war. This fleet was the basis for him to establish the new Second Black Phoenix dynasty, and it would never be wasted in a meaningless battle. When Charlotte drove the Holy Light Kingdom alone and re-entered the Sea of Aglars, Georgiadi Hadrian also assembled the fleet and sailed towards the New World. For him, the New World, the New Life, and the Second Black Phoenix dynasty will all be in the near future. Juno commanded the fleet and sailed into the Ferdinand route. He stood on the Swan Lake, looking in another direction, and said to Drusilla, "Take charge of the Swan Lake for me, I want to join in the fun too." This kid thinks that he is the only one who can see the weakness of Agmaris. In fact, I can see it too, but I didn't expect him to tell me about it, the weak evil god. That tastes sweet beyond words. I'm going to the banquet. Drusilla didn't say anything, but quietly took out a blood demon and handed it to Juno. Juno Arthur took the blood demon with a smile and said, "You are my best little princess." He turned into faint bloodlight and soared into the sky. He saw another bloodlight also soaring into the sky. He couldn't help laughing and said, "My student's big son really loves his father." He followed Gareth. He also wanted to see more fun. After the Holy Light God Kingdom sailed back to the Agulhas Sea, Charlotte saw a new route in front of him. He smiled and let the Holy Light God Kingdom sail in proudly. Soon, Charlotte saw the 32nd maze, Ishmaran Palace. Along with the Ishmaran Palace, there were nearly 1,000 ghost ships. Charlotte couldn't help but mutter to herself, "The quality of this batch of ghost ships is too poor. There is not even a single ancient magic ghost warship, and it seems that there is no saint rank in charge. Is Agmaris really broke?" He took out the blood spirit, liberated it into the form of a flaming spear, rushed to the nearest ghost ship, easily swept the crew of the ghost ship into the sea, and turned the ghost ship into a maze. The Holy Light Kingdom has a companion ship again. However, just a few minutes later, this companion ship was hit by 7 or 8 ghost ships in turn and directly smashed into pieces. Fortunately, at the same time, Charlotte also swept the second ghost ship. Amabella on the Holy Light Kingdom opened her eyes, howled, and fired a blazing white light cannon, which hit the Ishmaran Palace. Hitting the palace made of the remains of the evil god, shaking like an earthquake. This legendary warship was not designed with a main gun. Charlotte had always thought that it could not fire the main gun. Anyway, this thing was powerful enough, and it didn't necessarily need a main gun, so she didn't think about adding one. Although buying an alchemical cannon was expensive, Charlotte could still afford it. However, he didn't collect the last 3 extraordinary artifacts until the expedition to the Agulhas Sea, and he had never considered transforming the Holy Light God Kingdom before. Only then did Charlotte know that this legendary warship actually had a main gun, and its power was quite large. Before the blazing white light cannon hit the Ishmaran Palace, it pierced at least 10 ghost ships wherever it passed, and these ghost ships all turned into ashes and ceased to exist. Countless vengeful spirits suddenly emerged from the Ishmaran Palace. These vengeful spirits condensed into thousands of black gas masses in the air, and then each gas mass dragged the black light and rushed towards the Holy Light God Kingdom. A green light rose from the Holy Kingdom of Light. It did not resist a black light, but swallowed it with a green light. 2 behemoths fought frantically on the sea. Charlotte jumped back and forth on the sea alone. He had more than 10 ghost ships in the labyrinth. These 10 ghost ships formed a small fleet. Although each of them was attacked by several ghost ships and each of them was scarred, when the 11th ghost ship joined, these 10 ghost ships clearly showed an excited attitude. The ghost crews on the ship roared to the sky and were extremely excited. This time, Agmaris did not withdraw to the Ishmaran Palace, nor did he take back the ghost fleet. Charlotte tried his best. After a day and a night of fighting, he still did not take back more than 100 ghost ships. Facing the crazy attack of the ghost fleet that was more than 10 times his size, he also felt a little tired. Just when he was considering whether to retreat first, 7 or 8 of the ghost ships besieging him suddenly sank, allowing Charlotte to breathe a sigh of relief. He occupied 8 ghost ships in succession and even launched a small counterattack. Charlotte felt a little strange, because every time he was in a tight battle, several ghost ships would inexplicably sink. The naval battle, which had been in a state of entanglement, gradually gave him a little advantage. When the night fell on the sea and the stars were scattered all over the sky, Charlotte unexpectedly discovered that he had more than 200 ghost ships under his control. Although he was still at a disadvantage, he could attack and defend, and was not always besieged by ghost ships several times more. The mutual bombardment between the Holy Light Kingdom and the Ishmaran Palace lasted for a whole day and continued into the night. The blazing white light cannon fired by Amabella had dimmed, but the ghost shells of the Ishmaran Palace seemed to be endless. Charlotte occasionally looked back and saw this scene. Just as she was worried about this legendary battleship, she saw Amabella slowly disappearing from the bottom of the Holy Light Kingdom. Then, countless winds and waves surged, and this legendary battleship gradually came to life and turned into a giant whale as big as a mountain. Charlotte saw this scene and couldn't help but complain, "This thing is really weird. It's weird that it can compete with the wreckage of the evil god and the palace it turned into, and it can actually win." End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.